Thank you. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of council for Monday, April 26th at 7 o'clock. My name is Mike Little. I'm the mayor for the District of North Vancouver. And so the pleasure falls to me to virtually welcome you to our regular meeting of council. In the first part of the agenda, there is a resolution to hold the meeting without the public in attendance. Will someone, a member of council, please move that item?
So moved.
Back, seconded by Councillor Hanson. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Curran, second by Councillor Back. I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Council, just slightly moving ahead in the order of the evening, I've got a couple of sets of minutes that have been circulated. This is for the March 29th regular meeting of council and the March 30th public hearing. Are there any errors or omissions from those minutes as presented? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of those two sets of minutes?
Move. So moved.
By Councillor Meary, second by Councillor Back. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, council, we have a period of up to 30 minutes at the front end of any of our regular meetings of council for input from members of the public. In this virtual world, we have a sign-up process through our clerk's department, and so up until noon on the day of a council meeting, people have an opportunity to add their name to the public input speakers list, where they will have about 3 minutes time to address council. I have 6 names that have signed up to speak at the front end of the meeting. And then I have an additional 2 names for people who would like to speak at specific items in tonight's agenda at the time. The first speakers that I'm going to go to are on agenda items. And so this is, the first speaker is Lori Parkinson, followed by Carl Bean. Lori Parkinson, can you hear me? You are muted.
Oh, I can unmute myself.
There you
okay.
are. Yes.
And you can hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak. My name is Lori Parkinson, and I live near Moodyville. I'm speaking to item 8.1, the coach house at 4544 Capilano Road. The district has done a great job of increasing the step code regulations and making a low carbon pathway available for heating space and hot water. The low carbon pathway eliminates operational carbon in a new building if cooking stoves are also electric. I'll say that again. If space heating and hot water heating are done by electricity and the cook stove is also electric, there is no operational carbon pollution. That's fantastic. So now the carbon pollution from the production of building materials becomes really obvious. That's embodied carbon. And it's a big source of carbon pollution. Amazingly, no municipality has regulations on embodied carbon, although the city of Vancouver is working forward on this. However, this council could nudge builders forward on reducing embodied carbon. And I respectfully ask you to start doing this. You could ask the developers of this coach house to use low carbon concrete. It's quite available from Lafarge Cement, and the builders of Alkin College in North Vancouver are using low carbon cement. In addition, some insulation has high embodied carbon, and other insulation has much lower carbon. So builders could be pointed in the direction of low carbon insulation. You guys could do this, and ladies. I urge you to continue being leaders and to start nudging builders to reduce embodied carbon. For our kids and our entire families, all decisions need to be made through a climate lens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lori Parkinson. Next speaker I have is Carl Veen, followed by Margaret Harrington. Carl, have I got that name right?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Yeah. Well, we have proposed development on 4544 Capilano Road, including a garage, a larger home, and a coach house in the backyard. This property is about half an acre in size. Half of the lot is basically will be dedicated to streamside protection development because there is a creek on the east side of the property. So the issue we had here is, and that's why we are here for getting a variance, is that we do not have a lane abutting the backyard. So we want to put our coach house in, we have to approach the coach house from Capilano Road, and we have designed a driveway on the north, along the north property line to get to the coach house in the back. And we're proposing 4 parking lots on the site, 3 in a garage for the main house, and 1 parking pad beside the coach house on the north side of the coach house. This is the only way we are able to get to the coach house is from Capilano Road. Also, in order to make it better approachable, we have a turning area where the when the car drives into the parking lot on the coach house, the north side of the coach house, it has plenty of room to turn between the main house and the coach house. There's a drive area, a driveway that allows the car to turn around, will not have to back up all the way to Capilano Road. So that is our project.
Thank you very much. The next speaker that I have is Margaret Harrington, followed by Eric Anderson. Margaret Harrington, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Great. Dear Mayor and Council, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you on behalf of the North Vancouver University Women's Club. On May the 4th, coming up, the Canadian Federation of University Women is sponsoring a National Day of Action to promote the human rights of the elderly and the quality of elder care in our communities across Canada. Our North Shore community has not been immune to the shocking number of deaths and the physical and mental deterioration of our seniors living in isolation or in overcrowded, understaffed, long-term care facilities. Canada had one of, if not the highest proportion of COVID-related deaths in senior care homes among the world's wealthy nations. And you may remember early in the pandemic, care home deaths were reported as 80% of the deaths in BC. Decades of research has proven that support within the local community is an important key to healthy aging. Now, I don't personally have a loved one in a long-term care home, but I am a regular visitor on behalf of Highlands United Church to the Lynn Valley Care Center. And it's a very well-run facility, but my last visit there was February the 29th, 2020. And just days after that, there was an outbreak there. So it affects everyone. On May the 4th, advocates from across this country are mobilizing to urge all levels of government to respect the human rights of the elderly, which are our most vulnerable population, as you may have heard Minister Chrystia Freeland mention on CBC just last week. We invite Mayor and Council and all members of the public to attend the National Town Hall on Long-Term Care and Elder Rights, to be presented on Zoom on Tuesday, May the 4th at 10 a.m. till 12. The speakers include our BC Senior Advocate, Isabel McKenzie, and her counterparts from across Canada. And the link is in the letter that is coming to you, that has been sent to you by us. And it is also in our advertisement, which is, this is the advertisement in Wednesday's North Shore News. And we hope the public will get the link on here and join us. So thank you very much. And I hope you will be able to join us next week on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret Harrington. And my wife works in long-term care, so I'm very cognizant of the isolation that people are still experiencing. I know the government has relieved some of the obligations that allowed some visitors, but it is still, people are definitely still socially isolated in our community, and we definitely need to address that. So thank you for your service. We do appreciate it, and look forward to May the 4th to recognize elders in our community. Next speaker I have is Eric Anderson, followed by John Lawless. Eric Anderson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mayor Little.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Little and members of council. My name is Eric Anderson and I live at 2589 Derbyshire Way. And tonight I speak as the chair of the Blue Ridge Community Association. Unless you've been living in a different orbit for the last year or so, you will know that traffic and parking has become a serious and ongoing issue in Blue Ridge. The amount of visitors who are driving their vehicles to Blue Ridge has been staggering. And as we've pointed out on multiple occasions already, our residential neighborhood is just not geared for that. We're not trying to prevent visitors from using the trails in our neighborhood, but something has to change in the approach to trail access, as this is a real issue now, and it is unfortunately only likely to get much worse over the next couple of months. This will be due to the nicer weather that can be expected over the spring and summer, the likely reintroduction of the requirement for day passes at Mount Seymour Provincial Park by the provincial government, and the possible consequences of the pay parking situation at Lynn Valley Headwaters Regional Park. Additionally, increased COVID numbers in this province, combined and caused to a large extent by new variants, should also not encourage more residents to share what are often narrow trails or simply large gatherings of people. There's no simple solution that will immediately solve our problem of visitors driving to Blue Ridge. However, we would like to make a suggestion. This is something that seemed to work last year, and we would like to suggest that this be considered by council and used again this year. At the end of April last year, a number of Blue Ridge residents received a letter from the DNV's Transportation Department and were told that, quote, in response to the Provincial Health Officer's COVID-19 recommendation to maintain physical distancing, the DNV is implementing temporary parking restrictions to limit the amount of visitors coming to the popular parks and trailheads in your area, unquote. The temporary resident parking only RPO was implemented on a handful of streets, and it took some of the pressure off, particularly Upper Berkeley, Highness Drive, and Hill Drive residents. It also appeared to reduce the frequency of gatherings of people at or near the trailheads, which made it safer for everyone accessing and using the trails. In short, we would urge very strongly that council instruct staff to implement similar temporary parking restrictions now. We would like to suggest that this be implemented as soon as possible. This could be done as early as the start of May, and to last till such time that the authorities no longer consider COVID-19 a threat. This will also give everyone a chance to consider what to do with the parking situation and the visitors who will still choose to drive to Blue Ridge after COVID. At this moment, we wish to address the threat of COVID, which is on the increase, as well as the unacceptable burden that the influx of visitors has created for the residents of Upper Blue Ridge in particular. We live in a residential neighborhood, and it should be treated as such, as any neighborhood should. We really hope that council will deal with this issue very promptly and efficiently to help everyone, residents and visitors alike. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. First, we will make sure that our staff reach out to you to talk about parking plans, temporary parking plans for the remainder of the COVID period. But I did also want to thank you for your leadership. You've hosted a couple of events through the Blue Ridge Community Association and also partnered with the North Shore Mountain Biking Association to address some of the longer term planning issues in the community. And I just want to say how much that is appreciated by council.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. The next speaker I have is John Lawless, followed by Christine Elsey. John Lawless, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Good
evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is John Lawless, and I live in the Village Cove Townhouse Complex at the top of Naughton Avenue, and I'm addressing the issue of the detour being constructed to route one-way traffic coming into the village of Deep Cove around the sewer and culvert replacement project on Gallant Street. It's very critical to note that from the very beginning, all the messaging coming out of engineering has been that this is a temporary detour. I emphasize very forcefully the word temporary. Engineering has committed to consulting further with the community in June, after which they will make a recommendation for council to vote on. This leaves it open as to whether the road is really meant to be temporary or not. This despite always describing the detour to the public as temporary. Perhaps it was also described as temporary when the project was first put to council. It's important that council understands the devastating effect this detour will have on the neighborhood. We understand that the detour is necessary and will be in place during the construction. However, the issue is about the permanence of it. Mayor Little has visited the site and he will attest to the continual stream of children, seniors, dog walkers, cyclists, and paddlers who use Naughton Avenue to get to and from school, to and from the beach, or just out for a quiet stroll. While the detour is in service, bus, truck, and car traffic will come down a steep, curving 12% grade at a posted speed of 30 kilometers an hour into what is now nothing but a back lane. Deep Cove residents are seriously engaged in the issue and have gone to a great deal of effort to discuss the detour issue publicly. We have established an online petition that has to this hour over 3,500 signatures. As well, we are going door to door collecting hard copy signatures. The petition clearly demands the complete removal of the detour after the Gallant Street sewer and culvert have been replaced. After personally speaking with literally hundreds of people ourselves, there is clear and overwhelming support for the removal of the detour and overwhelming opposition to its becoming permanent. As well, engineering's own opinion gathering tool, the Idea Board, shows overwhelming opposition to a permanent road and overwhelming support for its removal. After further community consultation, engineering proposes to deliver its recommendations in a report to council for your vote. Note, we expect the report to be shared with the community before council makes its final decision. The community is working very hard and is seriously engaged as a stakeholder, and as such must have the opportunity to prepare a rebuttal to engineering's opinion if the community sees fit. To repeat, we expect to have the opportunity to review and rebut, if necessary, engineering's recommendation before council votes on the final use of the detour. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is Christine Elsey. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity. I represent the Upper Naughton Nature Protection Group. And I'd just like to comment that the Upper Naughton detour through the Upper Naughton Nature Park, I actually live in the Upper Naughton area, is a question of great concern to us. We've been assured by the District of North Vancouver that the Upper Naughton Detour Road would be temporary. And yet it appears by the specs that the road could indicate, the specs indicate that the road may be less than temporary, that it could possibly be a non-temporary road. So this is a very important resident recreation area, important dog walking area, an area for residents, children, etc. We really want to make sure that the road, the detour road, which you understand is important for the storm drain construction, we hope that it will be temporary as you originally promised. The Upper Naughton Detour Road is strongly opposed by all the community members of Upper Naughton. And I wanted to comment that it's destroyed bird and riparian habitat. And it's also, the logging off of the area has also destroyed a beloved forest of the residents in that area. And it's also compromised the ambience of Deep Cove. Further, all the Upper Naughton residents have unanimously agreed that the detour road should totally be removed and be reforested as soon as the storm drain has been built and finished, and without any compromise to the full restoration of the forest there. We do not want to see the road left there for either temporary, intermittent, or permanent use. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Elsey.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. And as I said, that there are a couple of other speakers that have opted to speak at the time of their agenda item. So next up, we have the delegation from Vancouver's North Shore Tourism Association. And I see a few representatives here. I have Peter LaRose listed in my agenda as being the person who's going to be introducing the group. It would be great if you could introduce the people that you have with you, and then you have 5 minutes to address council in the delegation, followed by question and answer opportunity for council. Welcome.
Yes, okay, great. Thank you, Mayor Little and Council. I'm actually just going to pass it over to Jennifer Bellack, who's the head of Vancouver North Shore Tourism Association, for introductory comments, and then I'll follow on shortly after.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Little and Council. My name is Jennifer Bellack, and I'm the Executive Director for Vancouver's North Shore Tourism. As you know, I'm joined today by Peter LaRose of LaRose Research and Strategy, as well as Forrest Steen, who was our previous chair and is now very excitedly our newest employee. It's with much excitement that we're here today to present you with some of our recent findings of our Value of Tourism study. Although the report findings are for our 2018 report, it gives us much hope and insight as to where we'll be again in the future when things do open up for travel. Because tourism contributes to our vibrant community and supports so many of our businesses, stakeholders, and attractions, we felt it was vital for you to understand where we've been and where we're going. And did you know that Vancouver's North Shore had one of the highest hotel occupancies in all of Canada last year? Our staycation tactics were so successful in supporting our businesses, large and small alike, and keeping employees working, all while doing it in a responsible and safe manner. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Peter to share our findings.
Thank you.
Unmute myself there, and so I can share my slide deck that I've got here, Mayor Little?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, excellent. Great. Okay, well, thank you again so much for the opportunity to speak about this really timely and important piece of work here, especially in the context of COVID-19, where economic recovery, economic development is obviously so top of mind for everybody right now. Just by way of a quick summary of the report, I'm just going to very quickly go over the value of tourism methodology, the model itself, and then I want to jump into the key findings because we only have a few moments here. So the value of tourism model is developed by Destination BC about 15, 20 years ago. It's been used in dozens of communities across BC, including Vancouver's North Shore in 2013 for calendar year 2012. So it really provides quite a robust and consistent model for estimating the value of tourism. So this is non-resident spending in the local economy. We use dozens of different variables. The model itself has dozens of different parameters that we have to tweak to try to come up with the estimates produced in the report. But nonetheless, we can be quite confident in the results overall. So probably the key finding in the report was the total amount of visitor spending on Vancouver's North Shore. So that's for all three municipalities combined. And so for calendar year 2018, it was just north of $350 million spent directly by non-residents on the North Shore. Very interesting compared with 2013, that's more than a tripling of the total amount of direct expenditures. And interestingly, there's only actually about a 25% increase in the total number of visitors. So spending's gone up significantly, which is really quite a favorable position to be in. It means people are generally staying longer, they're spending more money, and generally you've got the right kinds of travelers in the region. When we look at the multipliers or spin-offs, so that's induced and indirect economic impacts, and we add those in, we're well north of $500 million, $567 million in total economic output. Not all of that's going to stick to the North Shore, probably 3/4, 80% plus or minus, based on lots of studies that I've done and seen in this area, but still you're looking at well north of $2,000 for each and every resident in the region. So very significant numbers for the region. As I'm sure all of you are probably quite aware, that tourism is quite a significant force in the region. Also significantly, almost $100 million in taxes directly generated. Unfortunately, as you're probably all aware, most of that doesn't go to local government, but the federal and provincial governments take the lion's share of that, with about $6 million estimated plus or minus. These are rough estimates. It could be anywhere in the range of maybe 5 to 7, something like that. And then well over 4,000 jobs as well. So very significant stimulator of not just economic development, tax revenues, but also jobs in the region. I did some math. I think it was around 180,000 people in the region, plus or minus. You've got about a 65% rate of contribution to the local job market. So you're looking at a very significant portion of individuals being employed by the tourism industry in a variety of different sectors here. Finally, probably one of the most pleasing findings for me and for many that were involved in the study was just how impressive this really broad array of capacity management strategies are put into place on the North Shore. And capacity management, we call it demand management, sustainability. Really, it's about sort of smoothing the demand curve, making sure you don't have too many tourists and at the wrong places at the wrong time. And then also when you do have very low seasons and shoulder seasons, that you try to increase demand. So lots of different tactics that you can do to try to smooth the demand curve and move capacity throughout the region. As you saw with Mr. Eric Anderson's presentation earlier, this is something that's no doubt top of mind to many of you, probably all of you. As a former resident of the region, I'm quite well aware of it as well too. It's some really, really excellent collaboration there that we're seeing overall in terms of all of the different strategies, particularly the NSTA and some of the business partners, really trying to focus on generating demand in the shoulder seasons, low seasons, diverting people away from the more crowded destinations, like Deep Cove, Quarry Rock, Rose Mountain, etc., Capilano at the wrong times, Capilano Suspension Bridge, and move in throughout the region at different times. Really good work done by the District of North Vancouver as well, in all kinds of different ways around smoothing that demand curve and making sure people are going to the right places at the right time. That's it for me. I just wanted to really emphasize these are very significant findings. Another final point too is sustainability and stewardship. They're really core to the brand of your region. And so managing the region in a really responsible way is really critical, because that's what people expect: pristine sort of wilderness on the edge of the urban interface. So that's it for me. I just turn back to Jennifer for final comment.
Okay.
Just want to reiterate our thanks for including us this evening to speak about the importance of the value of tourism on Vancouver's North Shore. We're really pleased to see the deepening relationship that's been developing between the district and Vancouver's North Shore tourism. And in closing, just to really focus on the main point that we want to get across, that we're really putting a lot of effort and focus the past few years on getting the right people to the right place at the right time. Thank you for your time, and we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I did want to say we originally had your presentation set up, I think it was for March 8th, and we had some technical difficulties that night. So I do appreciate you rescheduling and making this work for us. But unfortunately, sometimes tech has let us down this year, and I think we're doing well tonight so far. I've got Councillors Hanson and Murray. Councillor Hanson, would you be willing to move receipt?
Yes, I'll move receipt.
And Councillor Murray will second. Thank you. Councillor Hanson, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And I remember preparing for the March meeting and being very interested in the data that you presented then, and was again interested in the data that you presented when I reviewed it in advance of tonight's meeting. The question that I have is with respect to the change in visitor spending between 2013 and 2019. And you pointed it out in your presentation. There was approximately 25, or I calculated 40% increase in visitors between those two timeframes, and yet a tripling of spending. And can you comment and shed any light on the consumer behavior that's changed, or the circumstance that's changed that's causing this greater degree of spending by these visitors to North Vancouver, the North Shore? Thank you very much.
Jennifer, do you want me to start with that?
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. So I can't speak specifically to some of the marketing tactics, the very specific marketing tactics, but generally speaking, overall in the BC economy and the tourism economy in particular, what we've been seeing is destination marketing management organizations like the NSTA really trying to extend visitor stays. We're seeing people generally staying for a longer period of time. And I suspect a big part of this, I'm ballparking here, freelancing a bit, maybe half of that incremental growth is probably also because of Airbnb, because you have more people staying for longer in the region, because you have almost a doubling in your overnight accommodation capacity as a result of Airbnb. So that's really had a significant impact on people's abilities to stay multiple days, as opposed to go to the North Shore. No hotel rooms or motels or campgrounds, RV parks available in June, July, August. It's probably, and so that's really opened up a lot of capacity. So, and people generally are spending more. We've had pretty decent inflationary period in there as well. So it's probably a bunch of those different factors.
Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for looking so happy and upbeat considering what the tourism industry has been through in the last year. Your optimism is encouraging. And I also wanted to thank you for recognizing that, you know, the impact of everybody wanting to come to the North Shore on a sunny afternoon at 2 all at the same time is and has been a big challenge for us, and certainly with COVID we've experienced massive numbers. Your presentation laid out, I think, Cypress, Seymour, Grouse Mountain, and the Suspension Bridge, but you know, just in the district I add Quarry Rock, the Headwaters, Lynn Canyon, that little donut shop in Deep Cove, and the many breweries that we have, you know, opening up in the community. And there is definitely an impact to that. One question I wanted to ask you about, so I'm glad that you really recognize that and you understand that we all have to work together to try to manage all that love that wants to come over here and check us out. I would like to ask you about Airbnb or short-term accommodation. We have lost some of our older hotels. The Grouse Inn we lost, and I think that's a big loss for the affordability for people that are, you know, looking to just take short trips or even long trips but can't afford the big hotels downtown. So we do have a bylaw in regards to short term, but we don't have a bylaw in regards to allowing short term to exist as far as an accommodation. And I'm wondering, are you supportive of us looking at the type of bylaw that we would need to implement within the municipality to address, you know, some of the challenges in regards to housing, but also wanting to support the short-term stay concept of companies like Airbnb?
I can speak to that one. Having lived in Lynn Valley myself for many, many years, I definitely, and was renting at the time, definitely feel the frustration of affordable housing. And we've been working with staff at the district to answer a lot of the questions around Airbnb, the supporting or not supporting of Airbnb, and how do we work together and strategically align for the best interests of the whole of the North Shore around affordable housing. So I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but we're definitely in support of working together to find the right solutions to making that happen, because I know it's an issue for many people on the North Shore, was for myself included. So.
Thank you. You did answer my question. I've been looking at the City of Vancouver's model for short-term accommodation and allowing, rooms like the old bed and breakfast to exist within a household, but not consider a full basement suite with a kitchen to be considered for short-term stays. But I look forward to working with you in the future on that issue and finding something that is, reasonable to most and still looks after the permanent housing needs of those in our community. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Kern.
Thanks. Hi, thanks for your presentation. I just noticed a couple things. The alignment of, I was just wondering if you'd done any research. Typically, a lot of the jobs, the accommodation, food and beverage jobs, retail jobs are some of the lower paying jobs. And of course, the cost of living on the North Shore is quite high. Do you have any research about the amount of folks that are working in the transportation sector that are commuting into the North Shore or that live on the North Shore? Have you done any analysis of that?
I can answer that with my hotel background. I can share with you that over probably about 70% of, I can tell you in the accommodation sector, our staff comes from the other side of the water. Affordability is a huge issue. If they live on the North Shore, that means they have to, have 3 or 4 roommates to live comfortably and afford. So this is a real challenge, and it's also been a long-standing problem that we do have on the North Shore, because hotel shifts, food and beverage shifts, traditionally work, all kinds of hours, late at nights, etc. And I know that from my other previous hotel partners, we would have a real issue, the last sea bus time, the bus schedules, the safety of our staff. So affordability on the North Shore and their housing situation is definitely an issue. So yes, I don't know if there's any particular studies that have been made particularly towards the North Shore, but I can say that this is a challenge that we all face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then I guess the other thing that stands out, although it's not really a surprise to anyone, is the, roughly 5% of that money going to the local government, but 100% of the expenses when it comes to some of the things that we need to do. And we're always looking to provincial and federal partners to work together to expand access to park space, to expand transportation, and all of those things. But I think it's maybe not well understood that how little the local governments actually receive for that. So I think that's an ongoing challenge. I don't know if you have any comments about that. I'm sure it's something you hear from every local government, but would be curious about your.
So maybe I'll take this one, Jennifer. In all of my studies, this is a really common issue that we see actually, and you have a lot of downloading of services on the local governments. I used to be senior policy advisor at UBCM, so I'm very familiar with that issue. And then yet all the infrastructure, all the negative impacts of tourists, crowding, noise, a lot of the traffic management, all that stuff is local government responsibility. So no, this is definitely something I've heard before. And I've seen some creative strategies around cost sharing and infrastructure development and things like that. But typically I see a lot of local governments going to things like the gas tax and finding money for specific projects and initiatives, things like that, to try to cover off and defray some of those costs for infrastructure impacts and other stuff like that.
Cool. And I guess my last question or point will just be about, really communicating well with what we're doing in terms of environmental initiatives. I think I know that the Cove is looking to become the first circular community in at least Metro Vancouver, and so we're looking at ways to have packaging not be single-use packaging, reduced, because a huge amount of influx of our waste comes from the huge amount of visitors and locals. Of course, everyone is addicted to single-use things, but really trying to shift that focus. And so we're always going to be looking for messaging around, reducing our impacts when we come in, and how can we support guests and locals to, participate in the circular economy and getting towards zero waste. I think is really important. It's something that our community is certainly passionate about, and no one likes to walk around and see overflowing waste bins. The issue, of course, is that we're creating too much waste, not that we need more waste bins. So some of those messaging, I think, are great opportunities to partner and really to, I liked the comment and the work that you've partnered with Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish Nation and Musqueam Nation, probably more so in Vancouver than over on the North Shore, but Takaya has recently rebranded and they're doing some exciting work. And so I think those Indigenous partnerships are really cool and really all about connecting people to nature to want to take better care of it. And so I think that's like the messaging that that we're trying to do, and we need to do that mostly by changing people's behavior about transportation. So any ideas are always welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you, Peter and Jennifer and Var, for your presentation. It's always interesting to hear more information about who works and who comes to our community and why they're coming. Councillor Curran addressed a couple of my questions, but one thing, at least on my time of council, I've found interesting is the different approach that local governments take towards tourism and promotion of tourism and the economic impact. And I think here, at least on the North Shore, compared to say a lot of the rural areas of BC, where you might find a lot more active local government initiatives to pursue tourism dollars, and to get tourists, mostly because of the significant economic impact that it has in as part of those rural locations' economy. Here, I think it's something that kind of just happens, and so maybe it would be interesting to hear a little bit of your perspective on the difference between the North Shore and our municipalities, and what we do or what we don't do, or what we don't have to do in order to see the benefits of the tourism on our economy versus what rural areas are doing, and how I guess the province, through Destination BC or other programs, are supporting these kind of two unique kind of tourism markets.
I can speak to that a little bit. About 3.5, maybe almost even 4 years ago, there was a Destination BC committee that was established. There was multiple actually, but one of the first ones was a 10-year destination development strategy. And because of our location on the North Shore, we got to be a part of the Sea to Sky 10-year destination development strategy, as well as the one for Vancouver Lower Mainland destination development strategy. Interestingly enough, through that 10-year strategy that was developed and is now in the works of putting some of these ideas and tactics in place, there's been many different committees that have been established. We're trying to sit on as many of these committees as we can to make sure that we're working together and collectively as groups to share ideas and to find the best solutions for all of the different communities through these collective groups. So actually, one of the district staff sits on our board, and I recently invited her as well, Alice too, to sit on a call where there was some opportunities for signage, just as an example, and were there any opportunities where we could benefit from signage if money was to come our way. So one of the neat things through all of this is working together through these different destination development strategies with other communities within our area. As well, through the COVID pandemic, there has been so much communication and sharing amongst all the different community DMOs, the community destination marketing organizations. And we've all been sharing ideas and sharing communications and sharing best practices and all the different things that we can to help each other. So if we see that Tourism Kelowna is doing something really well, as an example, they'll share it through another organization that we sit on, which is the BC DMO Association, BC DMOA. So we're all really sharing tactics and strategies right now. So there isn't really there isn't sort of any secrets out there that we're not aware of, that I know of, that we should be taking advantage of that we're not. So we're really, as a team of 1.5 at Vancouver's North Shore Tourism, we're really doing the absolute best we can to stay on top of all the different opportunities that are coming our way, just to make sure that the North Shore stays in the best possible shape we can for visitors coming to our destination. Long-winded story.
No, that's great. And I guess as a follow-up question, I know at least locally, and Councillor Murray mentioned this, it doesn't seem that, during the COVID pandemic, although we have had a lot less visitors, obviously international visitors or out-of-province visitors, it still seems like we have so much activity on the North Shore, and that's maybe it's locals, maybe it's more people from around the Lower Mainland. But if you had a crystal ball, and we can look a year in the future, what do you think activity levels will look like after COVID, when we've got all of our local residents now enjoying the outdoors more, plus maybe this pent up demand for travel and visitation across the province? If you can maybe lay out what that might look like and some of the challenges we might need to address.
Sure, Councillor Bond. So again, if I had a crystal ball, I love that expression. We're really working hard to come up with strategies on visitor code of conduct, visitor education, making sure that our visitors know how to respect our region, leave no trace, take out more than you bring in. Through different programs, and Tourism Iceland is one of the ones that we follow quite closely, that we're looking to potentially adopt some of their tactics that they do, because they do it in a really fun way and people seem to really jump on board and get into it. What do I think it's going to look like? I think people are still going to it's going to take time. I don't think that as travel restrictions open up, that I don't think we're going to see a huge influx of visitors. I think it's definitely going to be pent up demand. But I don't think that we're going to see massive groups of people coming and overtaking the destinations, the attractions, our region. I think there's still going to be a large amount of fear. And I think as people, we're kind of getting used to these behaviors of, staying 6 feet apart and wearing our masks and sanitizing. And, partners like Grouse Mountain have done such a good job with their clean, I forget the name of it, pardon me, it's leaving my brain, but the program that they've put in place for visitors that are attending Grouse Mountain. So I do think we'll start seeing visitors coming back, but I do think it's going to take time. And the programs and the strategies and the things that we're putting in place now, I think are going to align nicely with the timing of all of that.
And maybe Mayor Little, just one quick last question here. I really appreciate all of you coming here today. It's really good to hear more about this. I think we get an update every once in a while, and it's such an important part of our economy and a lot of our, a bit of our culture here on the North Shore. So I really appreciate that. I would just ask staff if you could please clarify the status of short-term rentals and the bylaw of short-term rentals in the District North Vancouver. Are short-term rentals permitted in the District North Vancouver at this point in time? That's for staff.
Mr. Milburn?
Your Worship, I can clarify that the zoning bylaw does not currently permit short-term rentals as described in a typical Airbnb. Council has directed staff to look at options and present those, and there have been workshops in the past with previous councils to discuss those options. So we do anticipate coming back to council with further advice on how that could be regulated in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Milburn, perhaps you could comment, is the North Shore Tourism Association, or whatever, Are they receiving any revenue as a result of Airbnb and short-term rentals?
Yes, Your Worship, they do receive some revenue attached to Airbnb through an agreement with the province. They may have the figures at their disposal tonight. I'm not sure, but it would be a conversation, I think, that that could occur at the time that council considers short-term regulation. We could have a conversation with the North Shore Tourism Association about those dollars and how they can be used effectively. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Does that address your concern, Councillor Bond?
Just a clarification, I know we have been talking about short-term rental regulations for a number of years, and so it seems like it's still part of a discussion. So,
yeah, and I might be unclear on this, Mr. Milburn. Just want to double check. Is it prohibited, or is it just not an expressed use?
Your Worship, it's not permitted. So all uses that aren't expressly permitted are prohibited. We do, of course, though, allow bed and breakfasts. And there are also various arrangements of people bringing in temporary accommodation, for a month or longer periods of time. So those things do occur. I think what we're talking about here is short-term accommodation, less than a month, and the bylaw does not specifically permit it, and therefore it's prohibited from the use at this current time.
Unless they serve food, and then it's a bed and breakfast, and you're all good.
Yeah, if they were to operate in terms of the bed and breakfast rules, which are not necessarily how they're operating today.
Okay.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. I remember attending your brand launch. I guess that was a couple of years ago now, but I love the brand and the energy and how positive it is, and the way it showcases our communities across the North Shore. So thank you very much for highlighting just the value of tourism in our community. I want to say that I'm very much in support of this industry. I know this is, to put it very lightly, been an extremely challenging year for all of the businesses related to tourism on the North Shore. Councillor Bond stole my crystal ball question, so I guess I would just make a comment, and that is that if you have any ideas or if there's any specific things that we can be doing to support some of these businesses that are in this industry, we're all ears and want to do our part to help. So I sit on the North Vancouver Chamber as well as the council rep, so please reach out if I can ever help, or if you have any ideas that we can assist with.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Yeah, I was just going to mention, I very recently have sent someone your way. There's a group of students that from Sea Cove that have come up with this proposal called North Shore Way, and it's a program to encourage people when they go to our tourism destinations and our hiking trails and stuff to spread out and try other ones. And so it's basically, people are generally aware of our highest priority destination spaces, but this is a way to encourage people to go to other alternative places where maybe there might be less congregating. So you're going to have some students come your way probably shortly to try to get your feedback on the matter. I did just want to say I appreciate the work that you do representing the industry and advocating for tourism in our community. It is a critical portion of our community's economy, and I do think, I'm optimistic that your staycation numbers are going to be strong for the rest of the year. I have 4 kids, and the idea of getting a weekend away, even if I can only stay locally, it's worth it, because we're all cooped up in the same house together. And so I think you're still going to have strong numbers for staycation for the remainder of the year. Council, I see no further speakers. So at this time, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. On behalf of the council, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, staff, just checking in. We're going to be moving on to item 8.1, I believe here. Let me just double check. Delegations, adoptions, no release of decisions. Okay, moving on to item 8.1. This is the development variance permit for 4544 Capilano Road. I have a speaker signed up to speak to the item, and so at this time I'm going to invite Anne-Marie Boston onto the meeting. Anne-Marie Boston, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi. I could hear you for a moment, and then I think your mute went back on.
I'm new.
There you go.
Okay.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay, I'm here with my husband because we're both sort of sharing this conversation. But like to thank you for your time this evening. And the issue we have about this permit variance, and we do speak for a number of people in the community, come across quite a few people who have been quite upset, is the clear cutting that was carried out on 4544 Cap Road, which happened, in fact, before the approval to accommodate the new buildings on this lot. Why was it felt necessary to clear cut all the trees? We believe this is an extreme approach which has a significant impact on the community, our environment and ecosystem, which we are all trying hard to preserve. These actions are particularly sensitive in this beautifully forested area where we live right now. We feel the impact is detrimental to the character of Canyon Heights, Capilano Boulevard, which is characterized by its tall tree corridor and canopy. It's what everyone experiences as they drive up the road, and we believe it's very unique to this particular area. Frankly, the empty space that there is now in that lot feels like basically someone's taken one's front tooth out, knocked it out for no reason. Over 40 trees, many of which were mature, healthy old growth trees, were felled. We would encourage the need for a more creative, environmentally friendly approach to design and deliver property development in this area. People are attracted to living here because of the natural environment. So the question is, why are we allowing this to be destroyed and old mature trees to be replaced by a few saplings and hedges? So I'm going to pass it over to my husband, Will Bridger.
It seems to us that the main reason the trees were felled was to accommodate the many building structures on this lot, in particular a coach house and new driveway. What is upsetting is how this clear cutting was carried out, presumably within district guidelines, but before permissions were granted for the additional buildings. The owner of 4544 Capilano Road has presented letters from 2 local residents who did not object to the plan in October 2020, specifically on the basis that trees were to be retained. We struggle to see how these commitments to the local community have been kept, given the apparent clear cutting 6 months later. We don't believe that sufficient efforts have been made to find a middle ground where the majority of the mature trees could have been retained, preserving our area's unique tree canopy, which as a community we value, and delivering the property design the owner is seeking. The coach house is an interesting design concept to optimize square footage in a less intrusive way so as to avoid the overwhelming monster homes so prevalently current. It could be done in a measured way that is not detrimental. We're concerned that approving this permit variance will set a precedent in the community and lead to further damage to our trees and to environment and its character. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Very much.
Why couldn't we have the...
Okay. All right. At this time, I'm going to go to Mr. Milburn.
Thank you, Mayor Little, members of council and members of the public. Tonight we have Mr. Michael Hartford is going to give a brief presentation, and we also have Mr. Richard Bowes able to answer questions with respect to the tree cutting. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Mr. Hartford.
Your Worship and members of council, Mr. Carl Vine, the project designer, has applied on behalf of the owners of this property to construct a coach house in the rear yard of the relatively large lot, which has just over 20,000 square feet of lot area. The site and surrounding lots are zoned single-family residential RS3, and Glenwood Park is located immediately to the east of the property. The proposal is to construct a 2-bedroom, 1-story coach house with 910 square feet of floor area in the rear yard of the property. The proposed coach house complies with the district's coach house design guidelines, but requires consideration by council of a variance to the zoning bylaw because the lot does not have rear lane access and is not a corner lot with flanking street access. A new single-family house and detached garage are proposed on the site, and these do not require variances to the zoning bylaw. The property is located within the district's Streamside Protection Development Permit area, and all proposed construction for the new house, detached garage, and coach house is located outside of the 15-meter protected area from the small watercourse at the rear of the property. The proposal was circulated for comment during the application process, and the applicant worked with neighbors to respond to their comments, particularly those relating to trees that are in shared ownership. The community association responded to the neighbor notification that it had no particular concerns with the proposal and encouraged resolution of any issues noted by adjacent neighbors. Unfortunately, the community association's comments were not reflected in the report to council that was dated March 31st. A second statutory notification was completed in early April. This was to advise neighbors and the community association that council would be considering the variance application at this evening's meeting. No responses to the statutory notification have been received to date. Development variance permit 28.20 is recommended for issuance by council this evening. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll be moving issuance of the permit. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Just for my own comments on this, I think the question is whether or not it's suitable to have an overland access to a coach house in the rear. I think we've seen these successfully in a couple of instances with mid-block overland in Lynn Valley, and also I have a very similar setup in my own house, only just for a detached garage, not for a suite of any kind. But it works relatively well with if the lot is large enough. I think you can accommodate the structure without requirement for a laneway or a flanking street. So if the lot is large enough, I think that overland is suitable, and I think that this is a reasonable infill in this space. So I'll be supportive of the staff recommendation. I have, sorry, you were the seconder, Councillor Hanson. Did you have any comments on the matter?
Yeah, thank you very much. I share the concern with respect to the trees. I visited the site today, and I had exactly the same reaction as was stated by those who made their presentations earlier in the meeting, and in certain written material that was provided to us as well. However, the issue before us isn't the issue of the tree removal. That will sit for a different day and concerns a different set of bylaws and a different set of rules that apply in the district. As your worship stated, the issue here is whether this coach house can be accommodated on a lot that doesn't have an alley and doesn't have a corner, as is set out in the bylaws. If it had an alley or if it had a corner lot, it would be possible for a building permit to be issued without a variance. The issue is, should we be affording a variance to allow this coach house to be built in this location? Having visited the site, having observed the size of the lot, 20,000 square feet, almost half an acre, as was stated by the proponent, I do believe this is a site that can easily accommodate a coach house. And if we're restricting our analysis to the issue of the coach house and whether a variance should be issued, I certainly would support it. And I have said in the past, and will say again on this occasion, perhaps we've reached a point where we could define a size of lot which we can approve coach houses on without the need for council intervention. Perhaps it's 10,000 square feet, perhaps it's 12,000 square feet. Certainly by the time we're talking about a 20,000 square foot lot, it would seem to me possible to construct a coach house without a lane or a corner lot and achieve the goals that are sought by the bylaw. Thank you very much. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Murray.
How wide is the lot?
Mr. Hartford.
Your worship, Councillor Murray, if you can give me a minute to look that up, I'll be right back to you.
So I
available to answer the question.
He said a minute, so I could keep talking.
Okay, go ahead.
So I do have a problem with this, and it's a process problem that I have. I got called about a clear cut on Capilano Road some weeks ago by some upset residents, and I've had calls ever since about a clear cut. And I have a problem with a variance coming forward on a coach house after the lot has been cleared. Would they have needed to clear the entire, or the lot, the part of the lot that they cleared to accommodate this development if this coach house was denied? When I got wind that this lot was clear cut, significant clear cut, I phoned Mr. Bose. He went out and visited the site to make sure that they were within their permits. But they applied to clear this lot to plan a garage, a separated garage, a 5,000 square foot house, which by the standards in the Capilano or in the district is quite small, on a half-acre lot. And then they cleared for a coach house that they were asking for a variance. What if we didn't approve the variance? Then they wouldn't have had to clear most of the lot. 2 weeks ago, Council, there was a variance application brought forward on our agenda. And they were going to have to clear 5 trees on that lot, and not one had been removed prior to us making a decision on whether or not that coach house was going to be supported. So I think there's a bit of cart before the horse. I'm not impressed, and I'm not going to be supporting this. If this is the kind of message we're sending to the community, that go out, clear cut your lot, and then you'll get what you want, I'm not any part of that. I think this process is backwards, it's inconsistent, and I don't understand why a mere 2 weeks ago, we had a coach house completely different, trees intact, waiting for us to make a decision. This week, this lot has been decimated, and now there's no going back, because there was a fait accompli that the community seems to feel is what's up, and that's why people have just given up. They don't have time anymore for this kind of process, or lack thereof. So we talk that the environment and sustainability is so important, and yet this inconsistent approach to how we're doing things is concerning. The other thing that I'm very concerned about is the Capilano, Edgemont and Upper Capilano Community Association did have concerns in regards to this application. They weren't included in the addendum that was given to us on Friday. And if people hadn't started making phone calls today, would we have known? I got a call from Corey Cost today saying we did have concerns. Mr. Hartford, you talked about the comment period. When was that? Before the clear cutting? Because I think if the community knew that this amount of lot, and I understand sterilization of a lot, but not sterilization of a lot in advance of making a decision on a variance. So I think we should be really concerned about this process, or lack thereof, Council, and I won't be supporting this application. Mr. Hartford, have you got the answer to my question?
Your Worship, Councillor Murray, the width of the lot at the street frontage is 66 feet. The width of the lot at the rear of the property is 75 feet. The depth of the lot is just under 300 feet.
So they're staggering the buildings in order to accommodate 3 buildings on this lot because of the width of the lot. When was the comment period, the first comment period on this project? Was it prior to the clear cutting of the trees, Mr. Hartford?
Your Worship, Councillor Murray, the first comment period started in September of 2020. And the most recent notification went out April 9th of this month.
So September, there was a comment period. Then they cleared the lot in the early part of this year. Then there was another comment period on a variance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if people had known that there was a variance attached to this property, I bet the comments would have been quite different from the ones that we didn't get, because people would have been concerned about, they would have brought together the issue of the clear cut of this, the total clearing of this lot, and the fact that there's a variance and council gets to make that decision. Very disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Curran.
Thank you. So I will support the variance, but I just want to broadly make a few comments to reiterate that I don't believe that our current policies for zoning, rainwater management, energy efficiency, mechanical systems, embodied carbon, on-site renewable energy, urban tree canopy, or biodiversity are aligned with 21st century challenges we face. And so I think a lot of these changes are culture changes, and they are a combination of that and technical solutions. I also just want to reflect on the fact that in this case, 41 trees, are removed, including 7 large diameter trees and about 6,500 square feet of housing. Over 3 structures will replace an older home. So this process is actually the easy thing to do with our current regulations. And I don't think that that necessarily advances our goals as a municipality in terms of more of a diversity of housing. I do encourage us all to think in systems. This isn't about just one house here. It's about the cumulative and long-term impacts of what we do today. And we are really trying to build a resilient and equitable community for the 21st century. So I will once again reference living buildings as the North Star. As far as my research has shown, it's what we should be aiming for. It's asking what is every single act of design and construction. What if every single act of design and construction made the world a better place? So I don't think we're there yet, but I also know that we have work underway in terms of biodiversity, ecosystems. There's some really exciting work that Richard Bowes and his department are working on in terms of urban tree canopy, because we really need to understand, not piece by piece, but long-term over time, how are the decisions we make going to impact rainwater management and all of these things in a changing climate. So that's a lot to unpack. I will support it. And I mean, unfortunately, in the way that the policies are set up right now, we are deciding tonight about this coach house, that's it. And the trees could have been removed, unfortunately, under our current policies with or without the coach house. So the coach house isn't really the deciding factor, because anyone could remove those trees on their property for what I think is a very, very small cost. And I don't think that it accurately reflects the benefit to our health, to our well-being, and to infrastructure, to bring down infrastructure costs over time. So I think we have a lot of work to do on our zoning and all of these other policies, but I believe that we are doing that work. And this isn't a criticism of staff. I know we're working on it, but I think that we need to approach these things with urgency.
Thank you, Councillor Kern. Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, much along the lines of what has been said before me, tonight we are voting on a coach house. And I think this applicant is coming forward with a design that works well with the site that they have. But I absolutely hear what the community is saying in terms of the loss of trees. It is significant. And I think there is bigger discussions that we can and should be having with regards to how we protect trees in this sort of situation. But I don't feel that we should be penalizing the proponent here tonight. They are not doing anything that they're not permitted to do. They're coming forward with an application and they've gone through all of the proper process that we currently have. But there's, as I said, definitely a need for us to have a further conversation about how we can make that process better. But I generally am a fan of coach houses. I think this form of housing is the kind of gentle density that works within our neighborhoods, and it provides some diversity in some of these single family neighborhoods. So this one is no exception. I think it's a good looking design. They worked with the site well, and I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor Little. A few questions. First, I'm wondering to staff, is the full driveway access along the side of the property all the way back to the coach house, is that a district requirement or is that a desired design of the applicant?
Your Worship, Councillor Bond, the configuration of the driveway was not specifically discussed with the applicant. There is a zoning bylaw requirement to provide parking for the coach house. As was noted by the designer in the public input period, there was a desire to provide a turnaround area so that cars would not need to reverse onto Capilano Road. So whether the driveway needs to be as long as it is currently shown is probably open for discussion, but this was the proposal from the applicant as part of their site layout.
Okay, so it's not a district requirement. I just wanted to understand that. Another question is doesn't sound like the coach house is going to be denied tonight anyways, but if it was, could that space be then added to the main dwelling to make a larger primary dwelling?
Your Worship, Councillor Bond, the 910 square feet in the coach house would end up presumably being living space as part of the principal dwelling.
And that could be either as the primary dwelling or as a secondary suite in the primary dwelling?
If the secondary suite was in the basement, then it would be exempt from the floor area calculation. If the living space was at ground level or above, it could be part of the principal dwelling or a secondary suite.
So technically, if the coach house was denied, the applicant could put a secondary suite in the basement, and that would be exempt, plus add another 910 square feet of floor area to the main dwelling for primary residence?
That is correct.
Okay, and I think my last question here is, in the letters that are included in the package here, the letters of support or letters of no opposition, there are a number of the letters reference specific trees that the applicant had proposed to retain, at least agreed to retain with the neighbors when those letters were written. Were those trees retained or were they not retained? Those specific ones mentioned in the letters.
Your Worship, Councillor Bond, those trees were retained, and that was part of the discussion between the applicant and the neighbors regarding the retention of those shared trees.
Okay, I think, I'm going to agree with a lot of my colleagues here, including Councillor Murray. If this was, it might not be my particular preference, and I think there's a lot of people in the community that like to have large trees on their property. But as was stated by Councillor Back and Councillor Curran, that's not the item that's for discussion tonight. And I think we've got, at least on my time on council, we've gone through the tree bylaw once or at least twice. And I know it's very difficult for a municipality to place a limit or to outright ban someone from removing the trees that sit on their private property. I think there's a lot of issues that we can set regulations and we can set permits and we can set requirements for the removal, but unless staff have a different opinion, it's very difficult, and probably if it was taken to court, the municipality would lose if we outright tried to ban removal of trees on the property. And that's, I think that's an unfortunate thing, at least in my preference. I like to have trees close by, and a lot of people in our community do, but a lot of people in our community don't as well. And so that's a challenge of balancing, finding the right balance there for people on their own properties to enjoy their properties as they see fit. And so on the question about the coach house, I think it is a suitable design for this lot. It's a very large lot, and I'm generally supportive of coach houses. It's just a different way to have a suite on the property. It could be in the basement. I generally think it's better to have living areas above ground, especially if you have a tenant or a family member who's going to be living in it. So I will be supporting the coach house application.
Councillor Bond. Next I have Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for staff. I went up and looked at the property myself as well, and I also went around to the street behind it, and I walked into the park and walked down the ravine to get to the back of the property. And so that brought a couple questions to my mind. First, there's a metal fence that's running along at the back of the property, and it seems to be the only barrier between where the slope starts to increase and then you get up to the park, the tennis courts in the park. So I was wondering, is that metal fence that I would have seen there at the back, would that have been the boundary line of that lot? Because it sits about 6 feet from the riparian water flow that's going through there. So would that metal fence have been the boundary line? And if it is, the metal fence has been taken down and about 15 feet into the bushes, which I don't know if it's part of the property or not. There's tables and chairs and a leather desk chair and everything all set up in the bushes. So I'm thinking it's probably workers from that lot because part of the fence is down there so that you can come through there. So could maybe staff tell me if the metal fencing I saw along the back is the end of the property at the back?
Mr. Hartford, can you speak to that?
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, I cannot speak to the location of the metal fence, and I don't know whether Mr. Bowes can speak to that.
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, I was at the property. I had a look at the riparian area from the west side of the property. I didn't venture all the way back through it, so I can't say for sure where the location of that metal fence is in accordance with the actual property dimensions and locations.
Okay, I was just I was trying to get an idea of how far it went back, but there was a stake in the ground that looked like it might have been a survey stake. It was just outside, farther into the bush from the metal fence, and so I'll take it that that metal fence must be the end of the property. It didn't seem to be that much farther back than the houses on either side backyards were, but in any case, another question I have is, do we have regulations on the amount of hard surface on properties?
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, there is a limitation on coverage, both building coverage and site coverage. So site coverage would include things like driveways and patio areas. This site is very large at a little over 20,000 square feet, so it is well within the building coverage and site coverage limitations in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, it just seems very large with the amount of cement that's going to go in there. Especially, I mean, not only at the front of the house, it's a 4-car garage, and then it goes all the way down the side to the coach house area, and then a turnaround area on one side of the coach house and a patio on the other side of the coach house. I don't like what happened with the lot myself either, as far as clear cutting. And I do realize that if somebody owns the property and they've taken all the right steps with the arborist to check things out as well, there's not much the district can do. But I'm in agreement with Councillor Murray that I think process here has been purposely subverted, and I'm not happy with that kind of a process. I'm also really concerned about where that end of that property is and the water path that goes through there. The house on the one side has a very nice built up rocks, old mossy rocks that are built up about 2 feet, where the water runs as far as I could see in the bushes behind the backs of all of these houses. And then you got to this lot and it's all covered over with trees and logs and stuff, and then going north, it's the same way. But I'm just really bothered about the process as well. And I think that they've maxed out the amount of, am I correct, staff, or correct, Mr. Hartford, that they've maxed out the total amount of usable space that they can build on this lot? They won't be able to build anything else on this lot.
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, that's correct. The proposal is to maximize the amount of floor area possible.
Yeah. So I'm just concerned that rather than think about the usual things that most of us think about nowadays, the environment, and if we're really going to be an environmentally minded council and we're going to put processes in place to help us get there, then I'm concerned about the amount of hard space that's on here and the size, even the size of the coach house is a 2-bedroom. So it's up there close to 1,000 square feet, 910 square feet. But the biggest thing that bothers me is the process. So I'm not in favor of this coach house.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Next speaker for a second time. Oh, Mr. Stewart, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think it's really important to separate out the coach house from our tree clearing processes. And it seems, and rightfully so, that council is raising questions about whether somebody can actually clear cut their property in advance of the necessary improvements, whether it's zoning or variances or whatever, by council. And perhaps we should have a workshop not only on that, but on other tree issues. I was involved in writing the original tree bylaw in North Vancouver. It goes back a long time ago. And I've seen variations and shifts as the community has reacted to various restrictions. So it might be very helpful for us to have a workshop with council to talk about where we might go today with respect to this, and in particular with respect to the issues that we have around tree canopy and all the rest of it. But certainly in terms of the process, whether somebody should be able to clear cut a lot or remove a lot of trees in advance of approvals by council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. I've got Councillors Forbes and Murray a second time.
Councillor Forbes just spoke, so I think it's my turn.
Sorry, Councillor Murray, Councillor Murray and Councillor Curran. Second time.
So just in the report, and I was around when Mr. Stewart wrote that tree bylaw, and it was one of the most cutting edge tree bylaws. In fact, it was the first one in the region. So it was one of the first. We were one of the first municipalities. But in the report on page 4, a total of the arborist report submitted with the application assessed 63 trees. A total of 41 trees are recommended by the arborist for removal, including 7 large diameter trees and 34 unprotected trees. The majority of the trees proposed for removal are related to the construction of the proposed principal dwelling, detached garage, and coach house. So we kind of are talking about coach houses at the same time that we're talking about trees. So these were cleared in anticipation of this application being approved, because it says in the report that they were cleared for the construction of the garage, the dwelling, and the coach house. So that is the problem, and it should be a problem for this council. It is certainly a problem for the community, and they have been very outspoken. Our canopy is degrading. It is disappearing because of the massive houses that are being built on these lots. And this one, as I've said, is relatively small compared to some of them, but it's a narrow lot, and that's why they're building the way they're building. It's all about design, council. It is covered in hard service with patios and driveways on both sides of this lot. Our canopy is dwindling. Our forests are struggling because of temperature and because of sustained dry weather. We do no longer get the rains that we used to support the hemlocks in this community. And we are continuing to allow basements not being included in the square footage. So that's why people that are owning these lots, whether they're spec developers, speculators, or owners, are excavating lot line to include those basements that are not included in the square footage. This one, over 2,000 square feet was their basement. I think 2,400 square feet was their basement. So I think we have a big concern. I'm coming to a close, Mr. Mayor Little. I think Councillor Mr. Stewart should bring back the tree issue and the size of homes on these lots as soon as possible for us to discuss this. We have been discussing it for years. There has been no change, and we continue to degrade the canopy in our community, which is one of the reasons that people want to live here and one of the reasons that we are an environmental community, but that seems to be disappearing very slowly.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Curran, second time speaking.
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to add, I attended an interesting webinar today, and the one of the authors of the Rain City strategy in Vancouver, which is seen as one of the leading rainwater management. And I know we're doing great work in this area as well. It's not to say, but they have a new policy that is going to require that 90% of rainwater be captured and cleaned on site. So I just, as an example of hard surfaces and built form, not exactly equating with how much rainwater gets moved, I think there are a lot of innovative ways to do that, and obviously with green roofs and things like that. I completely agree on a broader conversation about trees, especially given the fact that I don't think it's well understood broadly in the community what the health of our forests and our urban tree canopy is, and really to broaden this conversation around private ownership of nature, because it is something that we all share, and we need to find ways to, through education, I think, and expanding our thinking around the birds and everything that the trees are so important for. So I think the community would be supportive of that, and I look forward to a conversation. It hasn't happened on this term. We have not talked trees in this term of council. And Mayor Little, you're looking like we have. Have we? We haven't.
I don't recall. Well, I mean, we haven't. Sorry, I believe I heard Mr. Stewart or Mr. Hartford say we talked about it at one point. That might have been at the tail end of last term with a different council.
Yeah, fair enough. And the last point will be, I agree, on looking at single family zoning, it's something that we keep talking about because of this issue with basements being exempt and the amount of rainwater that they're displacing, et cetera, which I think all goes back to where I started saying that there's a lot more work to do.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to make some comments. I mean, first of all, my first time speaking, I definitely wanted to separate to be about the content of the variance permit that we're talking about here, and the question of whether overland is appropriate in this case. It's a large enough lot, I support overland in this case. On the issue of trees, which is not related to the variance permit necessarily directly, we have a major challenge in this community, particularly in this neighborhood and particularly north of this area. This has all been identified as intermixed forest area, where we have mature stands of trees mixed in with our houses throughout the area. It is a massive wildfire hazard. It has been identified in every single report from our fire department as being a huge hazard in this community. Now, I'm not saying that you need to thin all of the trees, but you do need to be cognizant of these intermixed areas and make sure that there's both a non-combustible materials being used in the area, but also that you're creating some space between the buildings. My wife's uncle was the fire chief up in Fort McMurray, and he came down to visit our house, and he was shocked at how close the forest stand was to our building, because there was no defensible space. There was no way you could put fire apparatus in the way and actually have a chance of stopping the fire from that space and stopping the fire from burning and mixing into an area. So I get that everybody wants to save trees. We have 6 to 7 million trees in the forest of the district of North Vancouver that we protect in private space, but we also have to think about emergency preparedness. We have to make sure that we have some defensible space between our home structures and between the forest space. And that means a setback in the forest. That means that we have to look at these sometimes as being a risk as well. The other risk that occurs is our community has a tremendous number of hemlocks in it, and hemlocks have a general life of about 80 to about 120 years, and after that they tend to fall over. That's because the hemlocks have a very shallow root bulb, and 2006, when we had our major windstorm, almost every tree that fell was a hemlock or it was hit by a hemlock. They come down, and because a lot of them were planted back just over 100 years ago when the community was largely logged in the first place, they've come in, they came in at that time, and they're reaching the end of their life and they're coming down. And so I hear the council's concern, but when we get into that tree discussion, we have to remember that people have to live under these things during a windstorm. People have to live near these things during a fire. There has to be some defensible space between the two. That's all my comments on this at this time, but I'm supportive of the variance. Any other comments from council? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries with Councillors Forbes and Murray opposed. Mr. Clerk, does that match your record?
That does, Your Worship, yes.
Thank you so much. Now we had item 8.2 on the agenda, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was set up, Mr. Wardell, in case there were any amendments at last week's meeting with council. We built some space into this week's agenda, knowing we wouldn't have time to adjust the agenda in case that council made some significant changes to the proposal. Is that accurate, Mr. Wardell?
This is accurate, Your Worship.
Okay. So 8.2 is withdrawn because there were no changes proposed to be made to the financial plan amendments at the time. The next item that we have is item 8.3. Mr. Wardell?
Through Your Worship, to council and the public, this tax rate bylaw supports the 2021 to 2025 approved financial plan bylaw, which was approved about 2 weeks ago. The tax rate bylaw is before council for first, second, and third reading and must be adopted no later than May 14th under the community charter, and the adoption is scheduled for May 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Wardell. Members of council, any questions on the matter, or would somebody move a recommendation? Well, I'm happy to move the staff recommendation that the tax rates bylaw is given first, second, and third reading. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Curran. Any other discussion on the matter? Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Wardell. The next item we have up for discussion is 8.4. This is bylaws 8486, 8487, and 8488, the OCP amendment, rezoning and DCC waiver for West 16th. And this is a matter returning from a public hearing, so the item was closed, and so it goes straight to council discussion. The only thing that I will point out just procedurally, council, is that for the OCP amendment portion, it requires a 5 of 7 vote of council to amend the OCP, which is just greater than 2/3 of the council.
Your Worship,
Mr. Gordon?
You there? It's a majority of all council, so it'll be 4.
4 of 7. 4 of 7, regardless of how many are present. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Okay, members of council, is there a motion? Okay,
I'd be happy to move.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hanson and Councillor Back. So Councillor Hanson.
Step aside for Councillor Back.
Which, sorry?
I'll step aside for Councillor Back.
Councillor Back, you're up first. There
Thank
you,
you, Your Worship, and Councillor Hanson. I would be happy to move the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Back, your comments?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this project initiated by the previous council has been in the works for several years. We are looking at a 60-unit, 5-story supportive housing project for women and women-led families on what is currently a district-owned site and will still remain a district-owned site, currently being used to store vehicles. As we look to our OCP and our rental and affordable housing strategy, the need for a broad range of housing types includes supportive housing. And I think it's important to highlight that this is not a homeless shelter. A supportive housing unit is a self-contained rental home with support services that are tailored to the residents. This development is going to be a partnership between the district, the province, BC Housing, and the operator, Rain City Housing. And I just want to thank everyone who emailed us, attended one of the webinars that was held, or attended the virtual public hearing. I remain supportive of this project for a number of reasons. It will provide safe, secure housing for women and women-led families. It's going to provide homes and space for families to live and for children to play safely. The location provides easy access to frequent transit, to parks, and to the other services that are that can be reached without the need for a vehicle. The supportive housing model means that some of the community's most vulnerable will be able to access the support that could be absolutely life-changing for them. Now, I acknowledge that we have heard concerns and opposition about this project, and I can appreciate that there is concern, and in fact, in some cases, fear from neighboring businesses and residents, and how a development like this will impact their neighborhood. I think the key to getting past this is going to be having open lines of communication from everybody, and by being good neighbors on both sides, and providing those opportunities for both the new residents and for those who have lived in the area or done business in the area a long time to be able to continue to stay in contact and provide, be in touch with the new operators in development. I think that this development is actually going to enrich the neighborhood. In summary, this will be the first of its kind in the district. And I think it's something that this council and our community could be extremely proud of for a long time to come. By supporting this development, we are planting the seeds for something that is going to grow and something that's going to change a lot of lives in hugely positive ways. And I think it's something that we will all be proud to have been a small part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My comments are very much aligned with those of Councillor Back. I'm very pleased and very proud to be supporting this rezoning, and as Councillor Back says, to be a part, even if only a small part, of what I regard to be a very important step in our community. The proposal calls, as Councillor Back said, for 60 units in a 5-story building, 40 studio units, 2 one-bedroom units, 12 two-bedroom units, and 2 four-bedroom units, all aimed at housing women and women-led families, all to provide supportive housing to this group of persons who are most in need. The tenants, we are told, will be from the North Shore, and this will be, as Councillor Back stated, the first supportive housing building of its kind in the district. And it represents a 3-way partnership, with the District of North Vancouver being the landowner and contributing the land for the development, BC Housing providing the capital funding, and Rain City Housing serving as the operator. The rents will range from shelter rates for those on social assistance to rents geared to income. And the project will obviously provide very much needed housing to a vulnerable group in our community. And the social benefits of this kind of proposal are obvious. Simply put, we need more of this all across British Columbia if we seek to address some of the most significant social challenges that we face. And the site is currently being used for parking cars. What a wonderful upgrade for a district asset, from parking cars to supportive housing for all of these women and women-led families. From my point of view, this is exactly the kind of use to which I would like to see district lands being put. In my view, the community engagement was thorough. It included, amongst other things, 2,000 letters to neighbors. And at the public hearing, the voices were overwhelmingly in support. 25 speakers spoke, 19 spoke in support. And I went through my notes where we saw so frequently words like very strongly in support, strongly support, fully support, 1,000% in support. These were common phrases by those speaking in support of this project. There were concerns raised by some as to the impact of the project on the surrounding neighborhood, and particularly the safety of the neighborhood. I note that the building will have a 24-hour staff. There will be staff on the building, at the building by Rain City Housing, 24 hours, 7 days a week. I note that there'll be a community advisory committee created to support successful integration of the building into the community. Rain City Housing, furthermore, has decades of successful experience in other locations. And I note as well that the tenants who will be carefully selected by Rain City Housing for the greatest chance of success in this housing form, that they will be required to sign a program agreement and a good neighbor agreement. I do not believe very sincerely that the project will create any kind of challenges to safety or livability to the surrounding neighborhood. As I said at the beginning, I'm proud to be a part, even as Councillor Back said, only a small part of this project reaching this stage. I thank the hard work of our partners and the participation of our partners, BC Housing and Rain City Housing. And for my part, I hope that this project can be got underway and completed just as quickly as possible so that its many benefits to our community can be received by our community as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Curran.
Thank you. Thanks to Councillor Hanson and Councillor Back for their comments. I just wanted to start with a little excerpt from a study I read, the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network. Says in all provinces and territories, women, girls, and gender diverse peoples experience some of the most severe forms of housing need. Black women, women of color, Indigenous women, gender diverse peoples, disabled women, poor women, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit plus peoples, sex workers, incarcerated women, newcomer women, and younger and older women are all disproportionately affected. Women and gender diverse peoples face profound violence on the streets and in public systems and are regularly separated from their children because of their housing status and exposure to violence. Despite this, housing policy rarely focuses on their realities, resulting in an acute lack of women-only, trauma-informed housing services. In the absence of access to safe, adequate, and affordable housing, women across Canada are driven into emergency systems that are insufficient and do not meet their needs. In many cases, these emergency systems are overwhelmed with demand and chronically underfunded, and thus regularly turn away women experiencing violence, homelessness, and extreme forms of marginalization. So I feel that we can help address this shameful reality by advancing this supportive project. And I want to thank everyone who took part in getting this proposal to this place, acknowledging that it started with the previous council and has been in the works for quite some time. So to the community members who came out and offered to welcome women and their children from everything from helping gardening and cooking to really building a community. I want to thank you. I was quite moved by some of the speakers. That is the future of compassion, care, and community that I want to be part of. And so I'm very proud to support this project. I think Councillor Hanson and Councillor Back did a good job of acknowledging that there are concerns in the community. And I do recognize that. And I think we really need to come together to ensure that we are working together. And as someone who votes for something, I really want to be a part of seeing it through and welcoming women and their children into the community. And so I'm really grateful and feel quite privileged to be able to move this project forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kern. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing that we have still such a growing problem in regards to housing in one of the wealthiest places to live in the world. It just stuns me that the rise of homelessness just continues to go up and up and up. And we have continued since actively, vigorously building housing since 1986 when we welcomed the world to Vancouver. And yet, as fast as those towers go up and those luxury condos, homelessness goes up too. And now we see parks all through the province, mainly on the West Coast because of our very mild climate. We get a lot of people from across Canada, I'm sure from other parts of the world that come here and fall into the despair of not being able to have shelter. And on top of that, many of them deal with issues of mental health and substance abuse. And it's beyond me why we have this problem when there's just endless amounts of money at hand to build all sorts of things for those of us that are not in this place. But we all know people that have been in this place. I know, unfortunately, far too many people that are in this place. And certainly the majority of them have issues with substance abuse. And that was one of the things that came up in regards to this hearing and this issue, was the issue of substance abuse. And this project, unfortunately, over the time that it's been discussed, has morphed into, it started off as one concept and it's gone completely to another concept. So it was kind of hard to keep up as to what we were trying to achieve. I think originally it was the province was putting money out and calls out for a homeless shelter, temporary housing, and then it morphed into permanent housing. And now we have these concerns about the substance use on the property. And this community in this area, it's certainly going through a morphing. It's changing a lot. It was an industrial community, a commercial community. There was no housing in this community. The OCP identified this area for some housing along Marine Drive. And it certainly has also had its issue of transient residents in the community and the border to which the city and the district share. We've had lots and lots of challenges. A few years ago, I was desperate to find a hotel room on Capilano Road for a family of 6 who were living in a pickup truck in the Walmart parking lot at Cap Mall. And so there is a lot of substance abuse in this area already with the homeless camps that exist. You know, many people that are living in their vehicles, not all, of course, but there's certainly some issues. So my question would be, is there a way that we could limit the amount of additional concerns in regards to illegal substances or even legal substances from those that are struggling in regards to this form of housing? I will say that I was surprised that substance use would be allowed within this form of housing. And I was a bit disappointed, although I understand that, you know, it's not simple to, you know, walk away from addiction, obviously, and they're wanting to support those. But I just feel like I think those people need an extreme level of service to get out of that level of addiction if they ever are going to get out. And I don't know if this is it. So I'm just wondering if I could have comment in regards to the ability for us to restrict substances from this form of housing.
Mr. Stewart.
Your worship, the challenge is that this is a housing project. This isn't a recovery project. It's not a shelter project. And you can certainly create some conditions around that. But the intent here is not to necessarily allow it, but they can't necessarily prohibit. And so the challenge that they have, I think, is really both internally in terms of how they manage what happens in the building and what happens outside the building. And I know there are a lot of anecdotal concerns about, oh, there's going to be drug dealers outside the building, there's going to be drug dealers inside the building. And that's not the target population. There may be a certain number of these folks who have a substance abuse problem, but the intent is to give them a wraparound support to provide them with the opportunities to either, if their challenges are so significant that they should go to another facility, or alternatively, this is a recovery facility with the idea of actually getting them to other kinds of housing. So I think we can provide some clarity to the community and to council with respect to what's and how they're going to manage that. And I think that's important for the community to know before we adopt, is how they're going to manage it, because I think there's just a lot of anecdotal fear. I mean, the fact of the matter is the evidence around the region is that these projects do not, especially these kind of projects, do not necessarily attract all that kind of drug association that I think some of the community is concerned about. And Mr. Milburn may be able to comment about it, but this is one of the most important projects the district is undertaken in this area. And this is just my view. We ought not to lose it because we can't clarify how they're going to manage it, and we ought to be able to trust that they're going to be able to manage it. So, Mr. Milburn, maybe you have some other comments.
Well, just before Mr. Milburn does, let's just caution, we're returning from public hearing. These are supposed to be council's own comments or based on information that came from the public hearing. And so, again, just to council, if you're asking questions about something that is beyond what was presented in the hearing, you just have to recognize we're in closure as far as that is concerned, and it would be better addressed in another way. Mr. Milburn.
Mayor Little, I'm good with the comments that Mr. Stewart made. I'm absolutely supportive of this project. I am. I guess my concern going forward, and this is just my philosophical position on this issue, is that the root cause of so many of these issues are trauma, mental health. Addiction comes from a place of trauma generally, and of course we need to provide shelter. It's a human right. Housing is a right. Although in this city or the Lower Mainland, it seems more of a commodity over the last 20 years than a right. And we're losing a lot of people because that commodity is in the stratosphere as far as costs. And that's just average people like you and me. But shelter does not deal with addiction. Just like, this is a Band-Aid solution, in my opinion. There's not enough support to give the people that are going into this housing ways to get out of their addiction. And we've built 2 addiction facilities in the district for men and women. They cost an enormous amount of money. They are fully staffed 24/7. They only take a certain number of people at a time. And we cross our fingers that when they come out after 2 years, they're going to stay clean and healthy. And there's no guarantee that they will not, digress back to where they started, but at least they're making that inroad. And unfortunately, I just think that unless the federal and provincial government are willing to provide massive amounts of money to deal with the kind of people that are dealing with the mental health challenges, the trauma challenges, and the addiction challenges, we are just housing them, but their problems are still there. So I support this project. We need to look at trying to address the impacts, and I don't believe that I hope that we will be able to manage everything going forward. I suspect that we will. We need to address the concerns in the community, not just about this project, Mr. Stewart, but about this whole area and about our whole community. And I think we have a very, very long way to go. I would like to try to answer those concerns, Mr. Stewart. So I will leave it up to you to see how we can limit the kind of substances that were suggested during the public hearing that may be allowed on the property.
So, Your Worship, we will get some clarification for council as we move forward. If council moves it to second and third before adoption, to ensure that council is comfortable with, the operational processes that will occur. I'm very confident that what I said is not inconsistent with any information that was provided to council in the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for providing such a wonderful overview of this project that has been, ongoing for a number of years. This is the second term of council where I've seen this project in the works, and I'm very pleased to see it at this point tonight. I won't go over many of the details that have been provided by my colleagues, but I want to reflect on one thing during the hearing, and it was one of the representatives from BC Housing who outlined that this approach giving a person a home, whether they use a substance or not, saves lives. It prevents further harm from those people that are either homeless, whether they use a substance or not, are at risk of homelessness, or they're fleeing violence. So I think that's really important to recognize, is that I have a social housing building with neighbors, right beside my property. And I think one of the most important things for us who do have homes, whether we use substances or not in our own homes, who are safe in our homes and we're not facing violence and we're not facing homelessness or other things, is to realize that in our position of privilege and of safety, the difference that having a home, having a safe home makes for one of these women, women-led families, maybe their partner, maybe their kids, is so huge compared to the concerns that we might have about them living there. And to just reflect on that, and what's really going to make this project successful in the long term is everyone, local residents, members of council, Councillor Curran has mentioned that, accepting that the people that live here are people just like us. The social housing project down the street from my property, my kids go to school with the kids that live there. I go shopping with the people that live there. We walk in the same parks together. We are the same people. We live in the same neighborhood. And it's so important that we embrace each other and we recognize with compassion the humanity, whatever someone's circumstances might be. And that's what's really going to make the difference here. And so I'm very supportive of this model, of this project. It's in the location that was the best location that we have in the district for this type of housing and for the people that are going to live there. And so I would just encourage everyone, local residents, local businesses, to really think compassionately, think positively, and how we can welcome these 60 households into our community. Many of them already live here. They're already part of our community. So I think this is a great project. It's a great way for this council to celebrate our investments into social housing and supportive housing. And I hope it's one of more to come. As Councillor Hanson said, we need more of these types of homes to accommodate and to welcome many people in our community and to be a diverse community. So I am in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. I won't go over everything that everybody else has said, all of my colleagues, but what they've all said, I also agree with. I think Metro Vancouver and the North Shore, obviously, we have a problem with finding either safe housing for people who need it, whether that's from dependencies, abusive relationships. We need affordable housing, which we all know in Metro Vancouver is next to impossible. And people that are in these situations require long-term housing. They need the security of long-term. And you can't find all of those things very easily anywhere in Metro Vancouver. So I think that it's our responsibility for those of us that may be a little bit better off, that we take care of people who aren't as well off as we may be. Society is only as good as the people who don't have anything, how well we take care of them. So I think it's really, really important. And I believe the communication and the fact that the children of this, that come with their moms to this facility will be going to school with the other children of other tenants of the other residential building across the street. And the children will play with each other, and they'll go to school with each other, and they'll recess with each other, and they'll walk home with each other. And I envision that to be a stronger, building stronger bonds in that community. It'll be another building that will be able to have friends and playmates and all kinds of experiences to share with each other. So I'm behind this. And I'd just like to point out that the school board was consulted on this, and there is room at the Norgate Elementary School for children there, and they have room, other spaces as well if they need them. This isn't just for the District of North Vancouver. This is a supportive housing for anyone, any woman-led family or woman on the North Shore. So I'm sorry, I hate to say, but I think there's a bigger number there than what we're even trying to provide here. But this is a start, and it's a first. And along with that, when something's a first comes some fears and some trepidation and maybe some previous concepts of what that's going to mean. But I ask everybody in the neighborhood and the families that will eventually move in here and the families who are already there and the businesses, I ask everyone to please just try to communicate with each other, and you'll find there's a road that you can all get on together when you communicate with each other. I think this is going to strengthen the whole neighborhood. And again, I think it'll probably come from the kids getting along well, and the adults will see that that's what they should be doing too. If they have any trepidations, I think they'll go away. So I'm 1,000% behind this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Yeah, I think Council's articulated the issues very well. I want to also thank Councillor Murray specifically for pointing out that there are some challenges in this neighborhood that exist whether this goes forward or not. We have a very serious situation with a lot of people opting to use RVs and campers in this neighborhood rather than existing shelter services and housing services. And when you go down there and you're along Roosevelt and in by McKay Creek Park and you talk to people, the response you get back is, I've been living in campers for 5 years, 7 years, 15 years. And when you hear that, you have to recognize that that means that they have opted out of several opportunities for housing along the way and have preferred to live in the camper and RV system than in the level 1 housing that gets offered. And so this community already has some challenges in it, but they're going to have to be addressed by more creative solutions more broadly. It certainly can't be on the back of this site in particular. I do recognize that there are some concerns in the community about the suitability of the site as far as proximity to infrastructure, whether it's in the middle of an industrial space, whether it's the first place you pick. Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a great project. This is a good location for it. The proximity to schools is enviable throughout most of our single-family developments neighborhoods to be only a 5-block walk to an elementary school. That is envious we'd be envious to be that close to our local elementary school. And so those benefits are definitely there. I had a hard time listening to some of the comments during the public hearing because I have to agree with my colleagues on this. Some of it was bound in fear, and I think it was unfair. And but yeah, in a hearing, you don't get to respond to it. You just have to listen to it. But the comments we heard about people, saying that they would have to move out of the neighborhood or that they were terrified for their family's safety. That was, I'm sorry to say, that was irrational. That was so far beyond what we've come to experience with low-income specialized housing throughout our community. Within the first couple of years, it becomes part of the community. Very few of them have higher than normal amounts of incidences that occur around them, and you wouldn't even know that they were specialized housing in a lot of our neighborhoods. And so it was a hard time listening to that. I do want to say comment specific. Most of my issues have been addressed by the council already, very well, very articulately. I know that MLA Ma was a big proponent of this, and I hope our MLA is listening to the feedback tonight. I want you to see this as a sign of good faith. that the District of North Vancouver made a commitment in the last election, both through the ballot box through the referendum and the commitment to low-cost housing in their community, but also individually. We've been making this commitment all the way along, that when District of North Vancouver land is included, we want to go for deep dive social benefits to the community. And we've been doing it here. We've done it at by Phibbs Exchange. We've done it up in Lynn Valley. We've done, we've been committed to it, both, and also back in the day with the Turning Point sites as well. Those should be included as well. The province is the #1 landowner in the District of North Vancouver. And I know that you're buying land in other municipalities and putting together projects in their communities. And I just want you to look at this and all of these projects that we've been approving that are on district land geared towards social benefits, that the District of North Vancouver wants to partner with the provincial government to produce this kind of housing. But we need you to come to the table on the capital for the land, because the district can't accrue enough land through CAC developments and through contributions from other projects to be able to assemble these kinds of pieces together as frequently as we think you want to partner with us on building projects. And so we need BC Housing, we need the provincial government to sit down with the District of North Vancouver and talk about real investment in buying land in the district and converting land from other ministries over to be suitable for housing, and working with the District of North Vancouver to produce those kinds of spaces. We're not going to be able to do it on our tax bill alone, locally, our limited municipal tax budgets to be able to acquire the land for those purposes. So I look forward to a longer discussion with the province on that, but I'm happy to support this proposal going forward at this time. Any other comments from council? Well, the matter has been moved and seconded. Sorry, Councillor Meary, you had a comment?
Well, I can't help but just chime in after your plea to the provincial government in regards to them, using their capital. And I know we're looking at the UBCM resolution in regards to local government development approvals, but has been said by almost every member of this council, and certainly a few of us that were on the previous council, this took a long time. A long time. And there's got to be a more efficient way of dealing with these kinds of application from the point of view of the provincial government, the funding calls, and BC Housing. Because the amount of times that this project changed, we could have had something built several years ago. The project at Phibbs Exchange took a long time because of design with the architect and the site. And so, we all of us can improve. All of us can improve and, become more efficient moving forward. And but it's an arduous process. And the people that we're housing are the only ones that are suffering, with the red tape.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, did you have a quick comment?
Just a quick request. I was trying to find the article going through my messages, but the federal government just recently gave $1 million to Burnaby for affordable housing, and I just about fell off my chair when I read that. So anything you can do to influence, Mayor, to influence the provincial government to push the federal government as well, because I'd like to know, how Burnaby got $1 million for affordable housing. So just push your weight as much as you can for this, please. Thank you.
It's a fairly high density project, but I'm happy to work with all partners, obviously. I definitely hear that it's a priority from council. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. At this point, my friend Mayor Buchanan, community health nurse, would always say that sitting is the new smoking. So people should take a stretch break, and I need to step away for a minute. And so if the council will indulge a few minutes break, or else we can move to the acting mayor to bring on the next item.
Just do a quick break.
We'll do a quick break. We'll resume in about 3 minutes.
I was going to say, as the acting mayor, I'll go for the break. Okay.
Okay, 3 minutes. Just as members of council are rejoining us, ask that you turn your cameras on so we can confirm quorum. Okay, well, we have quorum, so I'm going to, well, I'll just check. Mr. Stewart, are you back on the call?
Yes, I am, Your Worship.
Yeah, and Mr. Clerk, are you prepared to go?
Ready to go, Your Worship.
Okay, so we're going to be resuming now with item 8.5. This is the UBCM 2021 Local Government Development Approvals Program Grant. And is this the one we had a discussion on?
Your worship, if I could make one comment on this, your initial reaction might be, oh my goodness, we're going to apply for a grant to expedite development. And that's not the case. What we're trying to do is get some money to review our development processes and give council and the community an opportunity to look at it. So it's just not about expediting development. I just want to make that really clear.
Thank you for framing that, Mr. Stewart. And I believe we have a presentation from Ms. Patton.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and good evening, Council. And I'll say that Mr. Stewart gave a good spoiler alert on my brief introductory comments. Item 8.5 on tonight's agenda is to seek a council motion in support of a grant application to UBCM under the Local Government Development Approvals Program. The funding maximum under this program is $500,000. This grant, if successful, would assist the district's ongoing initiatives around customer service improvements through both the planning application and the building permit application processes. The processes looked at will be across the board, from single-family renovations and commercial tenant improvements right up through the types of application which Council just gave second and third reading to, multifamily, more complex applications. With a keen recognition, as outlined in the report, of the current priority applications for social affordable rental housing, as well as COVID business recovery support. The grant monies would be used for a series of best practices initiatives as outlined in the staff report and supported by Council's strategic directions, the district's official community plan, the province's 2019 development approval process report, the district's rental, social, and affordable housing task force interim report, as well as our ongoing COVID business recovery support initiatives. These initiatives include increasing the use of digital submission and review, examination of current processes and bottlenecks in them, recommendations for process improvements with a goal of increased transparency, inclusivity, predictability, and certainty for the community, council, staff, and applicants. By identifying challenges with our current development review processes, we can seek effective and efficient solutions to those. If the district is successful in our application for this grant, then the projects associated with the funding must be completed within 2 years of grant approval. Staff are always looking for ways to improve our processes and gain more efficiencies. And this grant application is very timely opportunity to support and accelerate that ongoing work. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And I will be moving the recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Second by Councillor Bond. I have no further comments on it. I think that this makes sense in light of our commitments to our community for transparency and efficiency as a municipality, and this goes to aid that. So I will be supportive. Councillor Bond, any comments?
Yeah, actually, contrary to what Mr. Stewart said, I think a couple of these initiatives in here, actually, I would like to see expedited. There's some review and policy work around zoning for affordable and rental housing, and that's definitely something that's a council priority. And if there's process improvements we can make to expedite those, we just approved a project that took a significant amount of time. And I know they recently had a discussion in the city of Vancouver around waiving public hearings for social housing projects that meet certain criteria. And during that, those presentations, a lot of the nonprofit sector were saying that a lot of the processes can cost up to $500,000 just to get through local government processes to get projects that at least this council is generally supportive of, social housing or affordable housing. So if there are ways to streamline those processes, save taxpayer money, everyone's money, because we are all contributing to the social housing projects, and get them here sooner rather than later, I think that's a big plus for our community. So there are some things that I think we should speed up, and this report and this grant application does include some of the ones that I would like to see processed in a quicker and more efficient way.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Curran.
Thank you. I'll support it as well. Yeah, I do agree that it does seem like things take longer than they need to. So I think this will be nice to kind of do a jurisdictional scan of, I guess that's not the right term, but a municipal scan of what we're doing, and then maybe jurisdictional, see what other municipalities are doing. And because I've always wanted to be able to put the projects that I think fill the priorities of the community at the top. And how do you do that? And I guess a broader concern that I would like staff to comment on is, as you know, I don't feel like our policies are at a place where we can expedite. And I feel like a lot of the work that we need to do is getting to that place where we're doing everything the best way that we know how for the time that we're in. I think a lot of things are really stuck in a previous time, and we need to modernize the way that we build and the way that we manage water and the way that we manage the natural environment and improve biodiversity through green infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So could staff speak a little bit about that process? And we have talked about reviewing zoning regulations around single family and some of these bigger topics. So is that separate from all of this, and where do you see them intersecting?
Mr. Milburn?
Your Worship, I think there's a clear intersection that with clear policies, we can communicate to applicants, regardless of the type of application, in a very clear way, which speeds up the application process, because if they understand what our council's requirements, our community's needs, then they can then tailor their application to suit those needs, which just makes the process much simpler. So there is a link. And what I want to assure council is that our various processes, such as the Community Energy Emissions Plan implementation or improvements to the STEP code, all of those things will continue to happen in parallel with this work. This is primarily focused on procedures and practices to ensure that we're reducing red tape, that we're reducing duplication, that we're making things as simple and straightforward, and reducing costs for our applicants with a focus on social, supportive, and rental housing. And so I want to assure council that we certainly won't take our foot off the gas pedal with those other improvements that council has indicated are priority, such as the policies mentioned by Councillor Curran.
So Mr. Milburn, perhaps I could ask you a question. I mean, Councillor Curran's comments are really around, will this help us move our processes along towards more a green perspective? And that's the question I have for you, because if it's just, processing things faster, that's not consistent with the general direction that council wants to go, and I think the community wants to go. So will this help us actually expedite those applications and developments that are more consistent with our values? That's the question I have.
Yeah, that's specifically what we're suggesting that we focus on, that we specifically tailor our processes to be able to address those issues which meet specifically council's priority objectives. And if there are other improvements in policies that do need to improve in parallel, such as environmental standards, those should occur either way, and that more clarity on those improvements will just make the process generally more efficient anyway. But certainly, and to Mr. Stewart's point, yes, we need to continue to advance the implementation of all the various measures in the CEEP, the Community Energy Emissions Plan, and that advancing those will be more efficient generally. So I would say this supports that intent as expressed by Councillor Curran.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that I really try to be clear about what the expectations are. I think that it is a space that we just have to recognize is moving very quickly. Embodied carbon is becoming and someone spoke to that today. Vancouver is actually leading North America on an embodied carbon strategy to reduce embodied carbon by 40% by 2030. Obviously, they have their unicorn charter, as I like to call it, because they get to do things that we don't. But I think that this space is moving rapidly. The National Building Code, as you know, is being reviewed. That's going to potentially make some changes. We're looking at things just differently. So it's like in a changing space. I totally agree. We want to expedite the process, but we also want to expedite the changes that we need to reach our CEEP targets and other targets that we have. So I recognize it's a challenging time, and I actually appreciate the fact that we have been moving forward, and there's lots of changes that we're looking for at a local government level so that we can have standards around green roofs, around these things that we currently don't have the ability to regulate in the way that I think we need to in order to achieve some of the targets that we set. So I do appreciate that clarification and will support this application.
So I did just want to mention, so we have less than an hour left in the meeting and we have 5 items still to go. I know everybody wants to talk about everything, but it sounds like we're going to get probably unanimous support for this, only we're going to spend a lot of time talking about it. If you think something is important and you want to add it, feel free to add it, but if it's just to support what other people said, let's move along. Councillor Bond, you're the next speaker.
Okay, Councillor Batt's hand just went down.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. No, I'll just say again, a little bit contrary to what Mr. Stewart said, whether council wants to approve developments or not, I think the efficiency in the process is still really important. So if council can get a decision in 6 months instead of 2 years or 3 years on an application and get that information in front of council, I think that's beneficial whether council chooses to approve an application or not. So I see that across the spectrum, whether it's for apartments or townhomes or rental housing or social housing. So,
thank you, Councillor Back.
Well, I will speak just to say that I support this, and one of the projects that jumped out to me was moving to full digital submission and maybe moving towards a digital permitting system. I think that's the direction that we should be going, and if we can start to do some of the simpler things quicker and be able to communicate with applicants throughout the process and let, it talks about them being able to go on to a dedicated web page and track, where their applications are at. I think that's a really positive move in the right direction. So for that project alone, I'm definitely supportive of the application, and hopefully we're successful.
Thank you, Councillor Back. I see no further speakers. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Council. Council, we're next moving on to item 8.6. This is the 2021 Centennial Bursary Trust Fund. Will somebody be moving this motion? Staff recommendation?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Murray. Mr. Wardell, did you have any comments that are essential to the bylaw? I mean, we do consider this every year.
Sure. Just to be brief, each year council approves these bursaries for students in the district supported by the Centennial Bursary Trust. The trust limits bursaries to $300 with no ability to increase the funds, which is why council supports a higher bursary with district resources, which is currently $805 in the recommendation.
So the nature of the grants has become sort of anachronistic, meaning it's just, it would have been very helpful to have that amount of money at a long time ago, but university costs have gone up dramatically. And so the council both subsidizes it to a higher level, but we also give out more bursaries than the bursary was intended to originally in order to be able to draw down the current restrictive rules on the bursary. But this is the recommendation before you. Any members of council wishing to speak to the item? Councillor Back, your hand is up.
That's from before. I don't have a comment, Your Worship.
Okay. Hearing no comments, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. On to item 8.7. This is the UBCM resolution on the protection of old growth forests. And Councillor Murray, this is your motion. So will you be moving it?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder on the motion? I'm happy to second it.
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. I'd just like to have the district offer their support to the municipality of Port Moody, who Mayor Vagramoff contacted me and asked if I would give support to this issue that is brewing in Fairy Creek in Port Renfrew on the island. And I said I'd be happy to bring it forward to our council. We've obviously watched the blockades in regards to the clear cutting of Fairy Creek. Last August, roads began to be built for Teal Jones to go and log a portion of this forest. Currently, the provincial government in 2018 commissioned a report, the Old Growth Strategic Review, panel to look into old growth within the province. There is a report that was put out by it was called the BC Old Growth Forest, A Last Stand for Diversity. And it was done by a group of BC ecologists who suggested there's about 3,500 hectares of old growth or ancient forests, depending on how you refer to them, which was in stark contrast to the provincial government's inventory of 13 million hectares. So there's a bit of a gap there. And but in support of the provincial government for creating this strategic review and bringing this panel together, there's a series of recommendations. And one of them is deferring all licenses and logging in old growth areas of the province until the report is implemented in regards to the impact of First Nations, you know, the impact of losing the biodiversity in regards to old growth forests, and what we've lost over the years in logging, and certainly Clayoquot and the McMillan-Bloedel issue many years ago, you know, brought the issue of logging to the forefront of the world in regards to what happens in British Columbia. It can be a sustainable industry, but I don't think we should be cutting down old growth forests. The Ancient Forest Alliance has inventoried one of the largest yellow cedars they've ever seen, 9.5 feet in diameter, in this watershed. And so there's a number of environmental groups that are behind this. And really in this day and age, you know, the province of British Columbia, as far back as many of us can remember, has always had that environmental movement, those blockades in regards to the forest industry. And I'm looking at Mayor Little because his family was supportive in regards to this industry. And it's an industry that looked after many British Columbians, and it can be sustainable, but we don't need to be chopping down these ancient stands for shingles in the California housing market. So I hope that we can be supportive of this resolution to the UBCM, leave the old growth alone, and create a truly sustainable industry and protect, you know, these incredible stands. There is actually one last little piece that's left. There is a pocket of old growth that's still left on the North Shore, and it's in Roche Point. And I won't tell anyone there, Little. So there are still little pockets of this, and David Cook has researched these little areas, and I think we need to actually step up as a municipality. And I understood that Parks was going to be bringing forward an application to rezone some of these areas that Mr. Cook has brought forward over the years to give them full protection from zoning in the future. So I hope that we can offer our support in regards to the challenges at Fairy Creek and all old growth in the province of British Columbia, and send a message to the provincial government that these pieces of land need to be protected at all costs for future generations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marion. Just for my own comments on it, I'm absolutely supportive of the motion. I'm supportive of protecting the old growth forests in our community. I think that some of the report is a little fast and loose on some things. You know, first of all, the sequestration of carbon in these trees is temporary at best. When the tree dies, in natural course, 100% of it is released back into the environment. So it is a temporary sequestration of carbon versus, you know, obviously coal or oil in the ground. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the justification. The justification is the important role they play in biodiversity in our forests, and also important wildlife habitats that can't be recreated by even very well silvicultured forests in our province. And so I defend them entirely just based on the basis of their biodiversity benefits and also just simply they're a glory to behold in some cases. If you've been into some of these old growth pockets that were preserved, and there are some hidden around the North Shore Mountains as well, there are just some absolutely stunning examples of several century-old trees that are absolutely massive and give you a sense of how small you are when you stand next to one of these trees. So I'm happy to support it as is, but I do think that some of the argumentation is a bit of a stretch, because the tree over the course of its life will release 100% of its carbon back into the environment. So
I understand. Just to be clear, Mayor Little, this was the this was the resolution that came from the City of Port Moody, and it was passed on to us to ask us to support what they had already sent into the committee for consideration at the UBCM.
And I don't think we need to alter it in any way. We'll just support it as is.
Makes it complicated at the convention. Thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to support this motion. Thank you, Councillor Murray, for bringing this forward. Times have changed. I mean, my grandfather came to British Columbia from Norway, earned his living as a logger, cutting down old growth trees, but that was 100 years ago. Now we find ourselves in a situation where there's only 1% of our forested area is old growth. And there's a widespread public sentiment that that 1% should be preserved for all times and all peoples for so many reasons. Some of them articulated by Councillor Murray in the report, and some of them just reasons that we all know, the difference between right and wrong, something that is so precious, that has taken so long to grow, ought not to be exterminated when there's so little of it left. So I'm very happy, pleased to support the motion. There's a growing consensus across the province, in my view, that what is left of the old growth forest ought to be preserved. There's lots of other sources of lumber. We don't need it in order to preserve our lumber industry. And it's important for our community. It's also important for Port Moody to stand up, but it's important for us to stand up and other communities to stand up and let our message be clear that this, what's left of our old growth forest, is to be preserved for all times and all peoples.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Next speaker is Councillor Curran.
Thank you. I had a few folks in the community reach out to me, and then I was made aware of other similar resolutions making their way around local governments in British Columbia, and the motion actually has evolved a bit, and also the situation has evolved a bit with the, and I'm apologize, I do not know how to say the Pacheedaht First Nation. I don't know if anyone knows how to pronounce that, but the territory, there's concerns there, of course, and the Union British Columbia Indian Chiefs have actually just released a support that largely supports the deferral to implement the approaches that were outlined in the report, in the panel's recommendation that the BC government did pledge to implement. So there are concerns around that, but I think I'm hoping that, I know Mayor Little, you just said we're not going to amend it, but the motion that has been supported by several local governments has been amended, and I'm more comfortable with the amendment that explicitly calls on the government to allocate funding to enact deferrals in an economically just manner in the full spirit of reconciliation, and to support the economic transition of affected First Nations and non-First Nation communities from unsustainable old growth logging for the development of long-term sustainable local economies. So I think that this needs to be done in partnership, and it seems like there's willingness and openness to do that, but the government does need to help support the communities that are most impacted. So I don't know exactly, I would propose an amendment, and I can email it to the clerk if anyone would consider that.
But again, the question is about whether or not we're in order for the UBCM resolution. If we support something that is different from what the UBCM executive is going to be considering, then we may be excluded from supporting the original motion. And so I guess my question to the clerk is, I just want to be very clear that if we change this current wording, does that effectively make it a separate resolution at the UBCM? And I know I'm asking the clerk to rule on something that is the Union of BC Municipalities rules. That may not be fair on the spot, but.
Well, it's also past deadline. I mean, these will be late submissions, which they'll likely get all of the submissions and combine them and say because a lot of them are very similar. Like I know Nanaimo, Victoria, Comox Regional District, Pell River, they've all passed similar ones, but so they're all going to come to the UBCM executive.
It's fine if we want to add that in. It was part of some of the resolutions that were submitted. I thought I would simplify it by talking about old growth. That was the point of why I brought it forward in the first place, was to discuss the issues around the old growth forests. So,
Mr. Stewart?
Your worship, you know how reluctant I am to engage in hours of discussion on UBCM.
yeah, because it's making a comment and.
Yeah. So, but I will say it would be better just to pass the resolution and then add on anything else that you want to add on as an additional comment. It's just a little cleaner that way. If you make it conditional, then there raises interest about whether or not in fact you support the initial motion. So if you support the initial motion, you could add on anything else you want to, for what it's worth.
Okay, so we'll call the question on the initial motion, and then we'll see if there's any additional comments you want to add as a separate motion. Is that your recommendation, Mr. Stewart?
Yes, it is. I think it's cleaner to support the initial motion, and then if we want to add anything on, then we can do that.
This isn't the motion that other municipalities have supported though. So could we add that last clause if I send it to the clerk?
So this is the danger of wordsmithing this in a council meeting and these kinds of things. Council spends a lot of time on these UBCM resolutions, and if we don't do it the right way, we end up wasting the executive's time as well. So
Okay. So
Councillor Murray has put forward a report. The report is in front of us. The members of the public have had the benefit of seeing the report in front of us. I prefer to vote on the report in front of us first, and then if you want to have a subsequent motion to also recommend something different, then that.
Mayor Little, could I just make this simple? I'm fine with adding at the end of this motion. It's quite simple. I wanted to simplify it by bringing forward the issues around old growth and logging. And so the part that Councillor Curran would like to add is, and that the government of British Columbia allocate funding to support the economic transition of affected communities away from unsustainable old growth logging in the full spirit of Indigenous reconciliation where applicable, for the development of long-term sustainable local economies and Indigenous protected and conserved areas where applicable. And I can just send that to Mr. Gordon right now. Many of the resolutions had that additional part of the resolution added, and I just wanted to simplify it by talking about old growth.
Okay.
Your worship, my only comment is the initial motion is quite straightforward about old growth. The subsequent motion has a lot of, for lack of a better word to say, discussion.
And that's why I left it out.
Yeah, and I suggest that if council wants to consider those secondary interests, they probably need to have a discussion about that as opposed to just tacking it on to an agenda.
Okay.
That's just my point. I mean, council can do what they want to do.
Okay. So I'm inclined to test the first motion first and then see if there's interest to add to it with a subsequent motion, because we have that in front of us.
Question.
And so are there any other comments or concerns from council on the initial report that was presented in the package? I'll call the question on the initial report. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with Councillor Curran opposed. Okay, and are there any follow-up motions to that matter?
Can I still do that? Maybe I missed. I just wanted what Councillor Murray suggested, like including the entire motion that other councils approved, that I thought was, we could add that.
What you would now have is a motion that says the District of North Vancouver also supports, and then your statement that you had said, that additional paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, I support that in its entirety. I just wasn't sure how to vote on it without it. Like, if it will be one.
We're just, Mr. Clerk, have you been sent the wording for the paragraph that's missing?
Your worship, is a simple point. If council adds on another motion to the original motion, it will go to UBCM.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's that simple. It's just a matter of a question as to whether or not council, given all the and I don't want to use the word intricacies, but the subtleties of that motion are supportive of all that. And I'm always very concerned when I see a lot of complex motions in front of council. It's like whereas documents, right? You have whereas, blah. And I just, my concern right now is that council really hasn't had an opportunity to discuss all of those issues in their entirety before we actually add it to the motion at the UBCM. But I'm fully respectful if council wishes to do that. That's fine. I'm just alerting you to the concern that you have to be very careful and comfortable that in fact that's what you're supporting in all of it. And I don't know that council's had that conversation.
It was a late addition. We know it's already late, and the request was trying to get it to the LMLGA, and we missed that. And so I just wanted to simplify it. But either way.
Councillor Curran, are you moving the recommendation, or do you want to just wait tonight and then we'll have a separate discussion about the other elements that were represented in that paragraph?
Well, I am, if council, I would like to hear from council. If council supports what Councillor Murray accepted as an amendment, then I would like to see if we could vote on that. And then it would be, I think, the spirit of what the intention of it was to look at old growth, but also look at Indigenous rights. So I think that we can do both. And if council supports that, then.
Okay, so are you making that motion?
What is my motion? I'm making a motion to add the amendment that Councillor Murray suggested, which was part of the original motion. That's and have correct. Council vote to see if they support it in its entirety.
It just wasn't in our original package.
Is there any way to get a copy or get that on the screen, Your Worship? I don't remember it.
Let's work on that. Did Councillor Curran, sorry, Councillor, you need to just wait for a second. Councillor Curran, did you send the wording to the clerk?
I can do that. I thought Councillor Murray had done that.
Murray, Your Worship, Councillor Murray sent me something that is quite, it's not that paragraph, it's quite a bit more, and I don't know where in that, if I could get an extract of just that paragraph.
So Councillor Murray, are you able to direct him to which paragraph it is you want set aside in the motion?
It was the last part of the, now I can't open it. Sorry, I'm having trouble opening the attachment in the email.
Council, this is the problem with doing resolutions on the fly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I have to say that.
You know, no, Councilor Murray, please don't apologize. The problem is that, you know, we have a fairly flexible system in the District of Vancouver where councillors can throw stuff in. And I'm not saying that they're good or bad or whatever, but you know, council is a governance body for the District of Vancouver, and you need to understand what you're approving or not approving. And this might have all kinds of merit, and I don't argue with that, but you've not had really an opportunity to have a good, fulsome discussion about what that actually means or doesn't mean, and so. But again, council, it's your decision.
Let's not overstate the matter, Mr. Stewart. This is to go to the Union of BC Municipalities conference to be discussed there. So respectfully, we can put it on the fly. If we can get the wording up on the screen, we can send it and have the discussion at that other body. And I'm satisfied with that. It's not directing District of North Vancouver policy. I would have the same aversion to policy on the fly as you've suggested. If it was directing District of North Vancouver policy, it's not. It is making a recommendation to be considered at another body. And
But
so,
it
Did Mr. Gordon receive the email? Did you receive the email that I sent you, Mr. Gordon?
Yes, I have that.
And you've opened up the first attachment.
There was one attachment and it has a great lengthy resolution.
Yeah, and in the
It's
bold
actually done
text,
at
in the bold text at the bottom, it says, and that the government of British Columbia. Oh, it actually doesn't even say British Columbia. It says British. Do you see that part?
I don't have any bolding on the version I have, but I'm looking at the last paragraph.
Your Worship, I respectfully disagree with you. I only say that in the sense that you're communicating to the rest of British Columbia a position, an interest that the Council of the District of North Vancouver believes in. And so I just want to exercise a little bit of caution about what we are communicating as a community and ensuring that in fact all of council supports it and the community supports it. That's all. I'm not disagreeing. I mean, if we move this motion, that's fine. And I agree, sending something to UBCM is probably very low risk, but I just feel that we have to be responsible and accountable to the community about what it is we're actually recommending, because if we recommend something, then the province actually might implement it. And I just want to make sure that we're sort of
Council, we've abandoned order to some degree on this, and so what I'm going to recommend at this point is that we table this item. We have Councillors Curran and Murray speak to staff, form a proper motion, and have it come to our next regular meeting of council. We've already missed the deadline for LMLGA. We've already missed the deadline for the UBCM stuff to come through the LMLGA. And so waiting for a couple of weeks to properly form it, which would give Mr. Stewart some ease, I think, and then having a separate discussion about council. I think at this point, that's what I'd have to recommend. Council, I want to be fair. A number of you put your hands up to speak to the matter. Does that sound like a fair way for us to actually talk about it with it on the screen? I just think it's unfair to have the discussion without it properly formed. Councillor Forbes, did you have a question about that?
No, I'd agree with that. I tend to be a person that needs to read things in front of me and understand them. And so I think we need a conversation if we're adding more on than what's already been in this package. And also this is the package that was given to the public. So because it's already late, like you said, I'd like to have the discussion like Mr. Stewart said, and then be fully aware of what we're talking about and then vote on it.
Thank you. Councillor Bond, same question.
Just since we've already passed the first motion, are you suggesting that we somehow rescind that and bring the whole thing back together? Because, just learning now that all the other municipalities that are passing us passed a different motion, and we're being asked to pass one that, or we're asked to pass one that excluded certain sections. I'm wondering why we would support the exclusion of those sections and not the entire. So
we didn't pass it.
Yeah, we voted on it.
We did. Yeah.
And so if it's bringing it all back and kind of rescinding the vote that we just had, sure. Otherwise, I'd rather pass the whole thing that every other municipality had passed and is submitting to the province.
Okay, Councillor Back, any comments?
Yeah, I would rather see it come back and be able to vote on it with the new wording in there. I need to see the whole thing, and like Councillor Bond's point, I agree we should be passing the same motion as the other municipalities.
Okay, thank you very much. So then I think Mr. Stewart, you have that direction then to staff that we'll table this at this time, but when it comes back, that the what the council would like to do is consider alternatives to add the paragraph, but also maybe combine and amend the existing on the table, the motion that we just passed, so that it reflects what the other municipalities have put forward.
Yes, Your Worship. Then we can have a full discussion on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, it was so complicated. I thought I was actually making it simpler.
No, that's okay.
But in the future, if any councillor has a concern with an item on an agenda, please just pick up the phone and make a call and talk to each other instead of dealing with it in this way. My intention was simply to deal with the issues of clear cutting by a logging company in regards to old growth. So I would encourage council to reach out and talk instead of trying to manage things in this way.
I think you'll find a lot of goodwill and support for the intention of the motion, but we'll do it at the next meeting if that's okay. Okay, so then I'm just going to table this motion through to the next meeting. Mr. Clerk, do you need any other specific direction at this time?
No, Your Worship. We'll have Adriana work with councillors Curran and Miri to wrap all this together. And my suggestion would be a complete new replacement bylaw as opposed to trying to amend the one that was just adopted, and it will simply replace this one. It'll be more comprehensive to everybody's liking.
Thank you. Okay, understood. Moving on to item 8.8. This is D&V support for Penticton City Council request to UBCM. Authors Councillor Miri. Councillor Miri, do you have a motion? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm sorry, council. I thought I was going to make things easier for us to deal with. I hope this one is a little bit smoother. So this resolution comes from the city of Penticton, and I hope council will offer support to them in regards to the UBCM resolution that we received from them last week. Quite simply, for me, this is about the protection of our role as a third level of government and respecting the decisions that local government make on behalf of our citizens. This is not about the differences between Penticton and the province, but more the concern of infringement in our role in the community. Land use and rezoning are paramount to the shaping of a community. For example, our network of trails, and certainly Cove and Mountain Forest, the network that we love and protect dearly was because previous councils saw the logic in preventing further sprawl and the need to protect the environment and accessible green space in an urban environment. A decision, I might add, that the province and the federal government didn't agree with, resulting in a lawsuit that did not succeed, thankfully for us. Our role and powers are clear. Like all levels of government, there are always opposing views. That is a democracy. To override decisions midstream because we simply do not agree erodes the very thing we are trying to protect. I'm sure I don't need to remind any of us what happened in the US when one party did not agree with the outcome of a democratic election. Collectively, as a people, we have the chance to move out collectively, as a people, we have a choice to move out our politicians and parties that no longer reflect the collective will of the people. But to determine a course outside of those elections is a slippery slope to impacting what our greatest freedom we have in this country, one that people die for in other places around the world. Democracy and the right to choose who we vote for, what those elected officials stand for, and how we shape our community is paramount. I'm very concerned about this direction, and I think all municipalities should be. We all have different ways of approaching how we manage our community, but we are given tools by the provincial government, and those tools need to be respected until such time as those legislative authorities are reviewed and collectively a change is made. So I hope that you will support this motion.
I'm happy to second the motion. And my comments on the matter are, it's about the principle that's at stake. I don't necessarily agree with Penticton's decision on this space, but that's for them to decide for their own community. And that's the principle, is that the local government, in seeking the advice of their own community, makes decisions about how they want to use the land in their community. I think our council has been very supportive of social housing in our community, and we've just demonstrated that again tonight. And so maybe our decision in the situation might have been different, but it would be our decision to make. And I think Councillor Murray fought a critically important fight back in the 90s, which was on the preservation, as she mentioned, of Cove and Mountain Forest as green space for our community. And you think about, had the government imposed primacy in that case and come down and said the municipality had to develop those areas, what it would have done to the character of North Vancouver. Our character has been built around mountain biking through those trails. It's been built around the walk to Quarry Rock and all of these great destination spaces we have in our community, because the local government was respected in the decision-making process. And so while I don't know if I would agree with Penticton's battle with the provincial government, I would agree that it's Penticton's decision to make with the consultation with their own community. And I think the federal and provincial government, while they may find us inconvenient at times to push forward things that they support, I think they have to work on incentivizing and coming up with projects that the local community will support. It takes a little more time sometimes, but I think that this is a bit of a thin edge of the wedge debate, where today it's a very important thing that I think our community probably would have welcomed. But tomorrow it may be something that is definitely not in keeping with the community. It may be something that the community is desperate to find a voice in their local government to defend the land use rights in their community, and instead the local government is shut out of the process. So I do think that the principle is an important one for us all to defend, regardless of the individual decision by Penticton. So I'll be supportive of Councillor Murray's motion. Councillor Curran is next.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I mean, I have thought about this, and I did a little bit of looking into the specific issue, because not everyone probably is aware of what it was about. But I really can't imagine that the province would, who does have an obligation to help with housing, as do I think all levels of government, step in unless they were terribly concerned about the health and well-being of people. And so I do think that there are times where it's possible that you would make what is an unprecedented or unusual decision because it was centered around people's lives. And in this case, I'm sure it's complex. I'm sure there's a lot to it. There always is. But I do not want to lose sight of the fact that the concern is about potentially displacing people into the winter in Penticton who don't have other places to go. And so I think it is a difficult decision. It was meant to be a temporary use, and the province is looking to extend it, likely, in my view, because there aren't suitable housing options for people. So if it comes down to a human rights issue and a housing issue, I think those are times where unprecedented things will likely happen, because we have to center the people who are going to be impacted by it. So I do have that that concern about this situation, and I do want to acknowledge that I have no doubt that it's complex, but I am concerned that it was made because of protecting people who were marginalized, and I don't know where they would go. So I do have a lot of concern.
Can I just clarify though, Mayor Little, this is not about that issue, Councillor Curran. So you're missing the point of this resolution. It's about a senior level of government overriding a municipal government. It's not about the issue.
Curran, hold on, Councillor Mayor. I think Councillor Curran gets the issue. I'm going to come back to you after I've given other people an opportunity to speak first, and you will have an opportunity to speak at that time. Councillor Back.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I tend to share many of the points that Councillor Curran made. I think this is a situation that's somewhat unique to Penticton. I can understand the principle, as you've said, Mayor Little, but I don't think this is our battle to fight. I think there's a dysfunctional relationship between Penticton and the province right now. Now the province is saying that we want to house homeless people who are finding themselves homeless. Penticton has a homeless issue. You've got over 40 people that are being housed in this temporary shelter. The municipality is not coming forward with any solutions from what I've read and understand just from following the issue in the media mostly. But what is the option? What is the alternative when you're talking about homelessness? You've got 40 plus people that are going to end up in a park, and we see what happens in places like Strathcona Park. So I think the mayor in Penticton has some personal connections there too that are a little bit questionable as to what his motivation is for his position on the issue. So I just think this is not something that we need to be fighting. I understand the principle and how paramountcy works, but I think in this case, this isn't for us to fight, and I would like to stay away from it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Forbes.
I cannot believe how complicated these things are getting. I think there's been a lot of assumptions that are being made by previous speakers, Councillor Curran and Councillor Back now. Councillor Curran said she doesn't know all the details of it. It isn't about whether you choose housing homeless people over not housing them. Who knows what's going to happen by September, October when the weather changes? We don't know. But what we do know is this is precedent setting for the provincial government to come in and overrule a municipality's ruling. And it's the precedent of that power tripping by the provincial government that we're voting on right now. We're not voting on that. It's not our fight to fight. It might be tomorrow. So we should pay attention to it today. And it's not about housing the homeless or anything else. And I haven't heard one person, now Councillor Back has mentioned the reputation of the mayor of Penticton. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to know anything about that. I just don't like this precedent, and I wouldn't want them coming to our municipality and dictating to us. So I'm in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Vaughan.
Well, it's an interesting debate. I know that at least the letter here kind of invokes the slippery slope fallacy that if one decision is made, that's somehow going to lead to other decisions that may or may not even be in the realm of possibility. So I don't really take that argument as a logical conclusion of the province making this decision, and it's not unprecedented for the province to use paramountcy in decision making. There is a process for that, and they do have that. And I think it's interesting to remember that the municipalities are creatures or children of the province, and the province does set the rules for how that relationship happens. And maybe as children of the province, we're accustomed to having certain powers and certain authorities, but they do set the rules, and sometimes if your children don't make the right decision, then you kind of have to step in and make a decision for them. And so I think in this case, it's not precedent setting. I remember two and a half years ago in Maple Ridge, there was a very similar situation with the BC Housing Project, and Maple Ridge was opposed to it. And a very similar motion came before UBCM and was very soundly defeated at that time for support for Maple Ridge's issue with the province in terms of housing. So it's not, I don't take it to be a generic principled approach. It's very specific to this individual situation, and for the reasons that Councillor Curran highlighted, this specific situation is about people's lives and their safety, and if the province needs to step in to protect those lives, then I think that's a decision within their authority and their ability to make. And so I don't necessarily want to get involved in this issue between the province and the city of Penticton, so I'm not going to support this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Murray, second time speaking.
So the province does have jurisdiction over, to legislate over housing, but the city of Penticton has jurisdiction over when and where that housing goes. And that is the issue. That was the point that Mayor Little was trying to make. This is not about housing, council. Okay, I said that in the beginning, that this is not about the disagreement that Penticton and the province has about housing, a shelter, a warming center, any of those things. It's about the ability of a municipality being able to determine where that housing goes, the zoning of that housing. And that was laid out clearly in the letter that came from the city of Penticton. So please don't connect the, mix the two together, that this is about trying to prevent housing in the city of Penticton. This is about our role as municipalities having jurisdiction for our communities in regards to zoning and where those types of uses, not necessarily housing, but just uses in general, are appropriate. And that's what we were elected to do. This is a serious issue. This will, I think, move up through the legal ladders. And, when Coven Mountain Forest was rezoned, the municipality rezoned, well, it was 1,000 acres in total, but it was 500 acres and there were multiple owners of that land. And there were just bylaws brought forward. They were given first reading. A massive outcry from the community culminated in 15,000 handwritten signatures on a petition. And the council of the day passed those zoning bylaws on Coven Mountain Forest against the existing OCP, which looked at urban reserve, including uses of single family and multifamily development up on those mountains. The province,
Council,
I just have to say the province, I just have to say, Mayor Little, the province and the federal government challenged us legally. And we knew instinctively that they would not be successful because it would change everything that we as a municipality do across the country. So if those powers are taken away from us, there really is no use for us to exist. And you should be very concerned about this.
Yeah, I'll just make one final closing remark for myself. Today it's something you agree with. Tomorrow it may be something you don't agree with. And that's the challenge. What if the government changes and it's a rail line through your community? And so seriously, you're going to say that the local government, I guess, has been told by the parents? And I just don't have such a low view of local government. I think that we have a valid voice representing our community, and maybe the government should just pick a different way to do it. Provincial government come along and say, we expect you to do this somewhere in your community within X amount of time. Go back to Penticton and say, Penticton, you come up with the solution to the problem, but we expect you to come up with X number of units in X amount of time. That way you're at least still acknowledging the local land use piece to it. There's other ways to solve the problem. But today it's something you agree with, tomorrow it may not be. The principle is what matters in this case. Those are my final comments on the matter. Councillor Muri, you had your hand? Okay.
No question.
So I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries with Councillors Bond, Back, and Curran opposed. And Mr. Clerk, can you confirm that?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 8.9. And council noting the time, we have 12 minutes until we have to have an extension of the meeting.
I'm not going to take part in this one.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Councillor Muri.
Neither am I. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
And at this point, before we open up the item, I have a speaker signed up to speak to the item. This is Peter Teven. Mr. Teven, welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Peter Tevan, 1900 block, Indian River Crescent. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, well, let me start by saying that the following is all my opinion, which is based on what I've seen and read in the public realm. but it's evident to me that much is going on in this file behind the scenes that I may never get to learn about. But what is evident to me is that this process that you've conducted to come to this point on this item, to bring forward a new pigeon keeping bylaw, what is evident to me is this process is not democracy. This process started with the assertion that Councillor Forbes was not acting in the interests of all district residents, but rather in her own specific interests, and that the pigeon prohibition bylaw was tantamount to a personal vendetta by one member of council against her one neighbor. Staff reported to council and to the media, and therefore to us, the public, that there was but one pigeon keeper in the district, and that was Councillor Forbes' neighbor. But now it's evident that is not true. That was never true. There was Councillor Forbes' neighbor, there was his brother that was reported, and we know from the written public input from last week, there was a Mr. Alizadeh who disclosed not only did he keep pigeons, but he'd been issued a permit by the district to keep pigeons. Add to this testimony Ms. Kershaw from last week, who said that her neighbor is a pigeon keeper, and if her neighbor is not one of those three that I just mentioned, then we have at least 4 pigeon keepers. Not one. Never one. But let's talk about one bylaw that affects everyone in the district because of just one property. The new single-family construction standards just enacted because of the wedge house. You all supported that. I think that's hypocritical. But just back to democracy, that meeting last week, that sham of public input, you did not leave yourselves time to even consider what was said Monday night before the agenda. This agenda was published first thing Tuesday morning. That makes it a sham. I don't see any evidence that your minds have been open. And what further evidence but was that none of the previous pro-pigeon keeping advocates even bothered to show up because they knew the fix was in. And the other evidence, a meeting held by a majority of council without public notice, where 4 of you signed that report, that was not democracy either. And now it looks like you're going to vote to ram this through. And it's obvious to me the fix was in long ago. This is not democracy. Your minds have not been open. It's evident to me that there's been way more serious transgressions here than Councillor Forbes ever could have even possibly undertaken. But, you know, we spoke last week about the cruel practice of pigeon racing, and multiple reports show that a majority of the birds are typically killed and their mates are widowed. Have you considered that? What about public health protection? I don't hear any comments coming out of you. I'm ashamed of this whole process. Now, I'll just close by saying to my fellow citizens, there could be a whole bunch of information here not in the public realm. It should be in the public realm, but I might not know everything. So I could be wrong, but I'll probably never know it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Teevan. I will just comment on the integrity of the process. The municipalities can actually have a decision immediately follow a public meeting, like immediately, like the public meeting ends and then the decision is made. In fact, that's the common practice in our neighboring municipalities, is to finish a public hearing and immediately go to the decision. And so us waiting a week, I don't think is evidence of a sham. I think it's evidence of the District of North Vancouver giving opportunity for members of council to consider the matter they've heard and come back. And so I'm going to push back and disagree on that part, but you're entitled to your opinion on the matter. Council, we have
I'll
a public discussion on the matter. It's being returned for second and third reading.
I'll move the bylaw.
The bylaw has been moved by Councillor Hanson. Is there a seconder for the bylaw? I'll second the bylaw.
Sure.
Okay. Councillor Hanson, any comments on the matter?
I'll keep my comments extremely brief given the hour of the day. There has at this stage been much water under the bridge with pigeons in North Vancouver District. This bylaw replaces an earlier bylaw that permitted pigeons, and while at the same time updating that bylaw, which was several decades old. Another intervening bylaw prohibiting pigeons has now been repealed. At present, according to the evidence that's been brought before this council, there is either 1, 2, or 3 residents in the district who have pigeons. That seems to be the totality of the pigeon keeping in North Vancouver district. With this knowledge, the keeping of pigeons in our community is not an issue that justifies this council's attention. If the keeping of pigeons becomes a community issue justifying further involvement, no doubt we will hear about that. And on that basis, I'm pleased to support this bylaw, which, as I say, creates a legal mechanism for keeping pigeons and updates and replaces the original bylaw, which was repealed a couple of years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanson. So my comments, I think that this is a pragmatic solution to a problem that occurred. It's not always the cleanest process to go through some of these pieces of legislation. My views are still generally that the District of North Vancouver has become an urban enough community that we don't need pigeon keeping in this community. But I'm also cognizant that a lot of the arguments that have been raised have been spurious at best about the health impacts of birds. I have lots of friends who work in the health community. I've never once heard them express that this is a significant health threat to people on the North Shore. So I had trouble balancing those kinds of things that were said. However, I do think that the impact on neighbors is something that would be undesirable in our urban suburban community. This is something that should be kept in rural and countryside areas, and so I find myself torn. But I think that the pragmatic solution is to proceed with the replacement of the original bylaw, even though I think that the original intent of the original bylaw was something that was generally applicable and generally good for the District of North Vancouver. I have had an open mind throughout the whole process. I've heard arguments on both sides, and I have no problem making the vote that I'm making here today. There was one other thing I wanted to mention about the process, but I'm sure what I would encourage, somebody's going to write a book about this at some time and to really tell the stories all around about it. It's not going to be me. But these things can happen for very complex reasons, and unfortunately, we have some certain confines while making legislation in the community that have made it very hard to tell every single thing that's going on as far as to actually accurately communicate everything that's going on. But I think it's fair to say that this is a pragmatic solution to the problem at hand. That's the end of my comments, but I'm going to pause for just a moment. We're
Your
up
Worship,
at
I have to make one comment. I plan to write a book, but I only put 1 chapter on pigeons.
I can make some recommendations.
48 years of municipal government, just 1 chapter on pigeons.
One chapter.
Very small one.
I wish you all the luck in the world, sir. We're at 10:27. We need to extend the meeting, and this is a majority vote of the council present. So someone moved by Councillor Bond, second by Councillor Back. Call the question on extending the meeting to 11 o'clock. All those in favor? Contrary minded? The motion is passed and the meeting is extended. Thank you so much. I've finished my comments. I see no further speakers lined up at this time. Councillor Bond?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's late, but I guess we will never have an opportunity to talk about how frivolous this whole process has been since the start. I know last time we tried to talk about it when we introduced a bylaw to repeal and replace the pigeon prohibition with the original bylaw, which morphed into this. So I can see good reasons for that. But there's been an independent investigation. There has been court cases which are now resolved. But I think there's still a lot of questions out there on how such a pigeon prohibition bylaw even got in front of council in the first place. And if now's the right time or the wrong time to talk about that, I think that question still needs to be answered, and that discussion does need to be had, because we did a report. The report's out there. We were not permitted to talk about the report until now. I'm not sure, right? And so there's still a lot of issues surrounding the whole process that went into the first prohibition bylaw that are not addressed and not resolved. And I think that leaving those issues unresolved over the long term is detrimental to the integrity of this council and the processes leading up to that bylaw.
Your Worship, I intend to bring forward the results of the Luca Ellis recommendations, but we really do need to put behind us the bylaw so that we can get into the process and the discussions. So I understand Councillor Bond's frustration, but from a legal standpoint, I would really like to put to bed the bylaw, and then we can get into a very fulsome discussion on processes, which is what Luca Ellis identified.
Okay, well,
yeah, and I will just, sorry, Councillor Bond, I will just say, I just don't think the council table is the right place to have that discussion. If members of council want to sit down with a reporter or go on their Facebook page and explain their points of view, be cautious about sharing items that might have been privileged in camera. But now that the court processes are complete and extinguished, then I think that members of council should feel welcome to share their views, and I'm sure the members of council that are not present will do the same. But I just don't think the council table is the place to do it. The question for us tonight is on the suitability of the new bylaw that has been presented for council tonight. Do you have any more comments, Councillor Bond?
Yeah. Other than that, I don't think we needed to address this in the first place, but now that we do have to address it, I think the new bylaw does add some provisions specifically around enforcement that are better than the old bylaw. And I think that had those enforcement tools been in the toolkit for our bylaw officers, a lot of this could have been resolved beforehand. So I think it is an improvement. And on the topic of pigeons not being an urban thing, I think if you look around the world, pigeons are an urban a bird that is kept in urban settings, and a lot of our other urban animals, such as cats and dogs, have a far more dramatic impact on our environment and our health in a negative way than a few pigeons in the district of North Vancouver do. So definitely in support of the new bylaw.
That's fair. Councillor Back. Oh, sorry, Councillor Curran.
Councillor Curran was ahead. Yeah.
Councillor Curran, sorry.
Thanks. I also don't have a book in the works, Mayor Little, although I perhaps could. But, this bylaw is about animals, and that's why I voted the way that I did based on my views of animal welfare. So I haven't changed those views, but I am opposed to the process, and I advocated for this bylaw to be brought back to a public process since November of 2019. So I think COVID did make this go on longer than it would have otherwise. But I just wanted to read the preamble to our code of ethics. States that the residents and businesses of the District of North Vancouver are entitled to have a fair, open local government that has earned the public's full confidence for integrity. And I believe that we fell short, and that when we have an opportunity to listen and to learn and to do better, that we need to do that. And so I will also be voting in support of reinstating a modernized bylaw. None of this is ideal, but I think that that's, given the circumstances, the best way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this has certainly been a long and very costly process, something that never should have been brought forward in the first place. We were never dealing with a community concern. But I do think, what we're trying to do is put things back to the way they were before. And I think we're doing it in a better way. We're refreshing the bylaw with changes that I do think improve it. I think the public still has a lot of questions as to how this ever came about in the first place, but I guess we'll save that for Mr. Stewart's book. I don't know, but I'll leave it at that. I'm just glad to see that we're finally moving on from this and getting things back in the way they were before.
Okay, I promise not to do a book.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Council. Okay. The next item is just simply reports. I'm going to request that, tonight's not the night for lengthy reports. Is there something important that Mr. Stewart, that you wanted to share? Any reports that are urgent or important?
No, not at this time, Your Worship, and we're regularly using information reports to council to keep abreast of things that are happening, and there's lots of stuff that's happening. So,
okay, thank you. Any other members of council wish to make a report? Okay, thank you all so much. We've completed the work of the evening. I'll accept adjournment at this point. Thank you, Councillor Hanson. I accept. Have yourselves a fantastic evening. Thank you to the members of the public that joined us and stayed through the meeting with us. We do appreciate your following along and taking these matters of community very important. Have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.